like they were happy with what he did. He just got a job offer from another place, and they're
All
taking
right,
it for
waiting for
full-time.
Michael. Are we ready?
Hasn't been there a year. That's crazy,
Where is he?
but he's fast learner.
Yeah.
They asked him questions, they liked his answers, and like, yes, we they're awesome. He said, well, my girlfriend works for the company too. What's she do? Payroll. What do they pay her? This, no problem. We'll take it. Jordan got a flag. They sent him for.
Naomi, we're waiting on Michael. Is he on?
Thank you for your patience. He'll be on momentarily. We had some technical things we had to work out. He'll be on the screen soon.
Lifted my lamp. He was behind the seat, and that's the one next to him. If we got sideways, they just took it over. But they let him do it as long as he could. Crazy. 25 years old, right? 5 or yes. 6 in July. Yeah. He's here now for a month. So got to see him, haven't seen him here. He was here for Father's Day. That was awesome. So it surprised me. So, yeah. 4 point and all his classes. They're sending him to Alaska because he's working on a project on how to harness oceanic engineering. So how to harness wave energy and turn it into the waves just crash. Well, they have ways. Figured out how to maximize all that energy into power. Well, this is
Everyone, we're just waiting a moment for city manager. Oh, there he
so
is.
it's
I
really
see him.
more a program, it's not a baby.
All right, it is 6:02. I'd like to call to order the meeting of June 22nd, 2021. And we will, and I lost my last point. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. And Councilmember Cavalier, can you lead us in the pledge?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next up is roll call.
Mayor Holtzclaw. Mayor Pro Tem Vanel.
Here,
Councilmember Bond.
Here.
Councilmember Cavallari.
Here.
Councilmember Steckler.
Here.
Councilmember Briles.
Here.
Councilmember Morgan.
Here.
Mayor Holtzclaw told all of us that he would be on vacation this evening. So do I have a motion to excuse him from the meeting this evening?
Motion to excuse Mayor Holtzclaw. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Counted. No, you need to ask.
Anyone opposed?
I'm not opposed.
No one's opposed. All right, thank you. Well, we are moving on to audience communication. We have a few people in the room, and I will also try to look for those on the screen with their hands up. If anyone, there's someone, if you would like to speak, you can step up to the microphone, and it is your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Michael Turback. I live in By Maple, 21143rd Place, Southeast Creek, Washington. I'm here because I saw recently, and this is old news, is the parcel of land that we have up here by the sports park. I'm taking up pickleball. I took it up starting with August last year because of the pandemic. It was a way to get outside, to meet people. I probably met 50 people so far playing pickleball. It's the fastest growing sport in the country right now. And it seems to me that Mill Creek needs to catch up. We've got Edmonds, Kent, Shoreline, Everett, Marysville, Mukilteo. Everybody has outdoor dedicated courts for pickleball. We do not. Most of the people that play are probably over 50 years of age. and there's a lot of younger ones now that are catching up. This is a homegrown sport that started on Bainbridge Island in 1965. Joel Pritchard was the congressman at the time that started this in his yard with his next door neighbor, Bill Bell. Anyway, it's a fun thing. There's a lot of interest. I've been playing up at the Y. There's like 2 indoor courts there, and sometimes we have 20 people waiting to play. And these are senior citizens. You're getting them off the street and having fun and working out and being social. And I just think it's about time Mill Creek caught up. And if we've got the land to do it, let's start thinking about it. That's all. And I did talk to Vincent one time, but I never heard back.
I sent an email.
Oh, you probably came in my junk mail and it got tossed, sorry. But anyway, I just want you to know that this is something that I think Mill Creek needs to work on and consider. And if you've got the property and if there's anything I can do, like if there's somebody that knows how to find money for this, grants, whatever, I'd be happy to help out in any way I can. And I have many citizens. Oh, time. Was that my timer? Oh,
Thank you.
many senior citizens anyway that will back me up. And let's keep everybody healthy and social. This is one of the few sports that is probably most social. We accept welcome drop-ins. Anybody who wants to come and play with us, come and play, we'll accept you. And the youngest person I've been playing with, I think, is a teenager. How is he, 14? He's about 14 at the Y, yeah. And I think the oldest person I've been playing with is like 81. So anyway, it's a great thing. I encourage you all to come out and play if you ever see a court. We have one court in Mill Creek at Heron Park that is not completely lined. We have to finish the lines with chalk, but it's only a 20-minute allowance of time to play. So if somebody shows up, and we've had this happen, people with their a stroller and a little boy that wanted to practice baseball in there. 6 of us had to leave while they came in and did the Zoom. So my point is, we want some dedicated courts.
Thank you.
And I'm speaking for a lot of people. Any questions?
During this time, this time is for audience communication. But
Okay.
it's not time for us to have dialogue back and forth.
Okay, sure.
Thank
All
you.
right,
And
that's
I'm
all.
sure that some of us may actually be getting back with you.
Okay, great. I love it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to call on Barb Hidos. I see her hand raised. Ooh, I see everybody has a hand raised on the line today. Barb.
Barb Heidel, 1401 144th Place Southeast. I want to thank everyone who was involved in bringing the senior graduate parade together to a wonderful fruition. I wish to also recognize what a great job the police department did with this parade. This was an extra assignment for them, which was well organized and smoothly run with as little interruption as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Melissa Duque, I see your hand raised.
Yes, hello, Melissa Duque, 13513 31st Drive here in Mill Creek. I had just 2 things I wanted to point out. One was on the agenda today. I'm very excited to see that you will be talking about from the Parks and Recreation Board, our recommendations for the access points. Thank you for taking the time and reviewing this. We're very excited to have this with you. I want to say a special thank you to Councilmember Vincent Cavallari for all of his work on the board and helping us figure through this. And of course, to City Staff Member Kristen Rasmussen for her work, and Director Mike Todd and Matthew, everyone who was involved in this project. Just a little background, you may or may not be aware that the Park and Recreation Board, we meet monthly, but during the summer, generally in June, we'll do 2 extra days where we will walk around to all of the parks. We split it up. It's a great time. We appreciate getting together. Even during the pandemic, we just made it smaller groups and kept social distancing. And so this is one of those things where we, after lots of conversations, thought that this would be a good opportunity. I won't speak to it because our city manager will be, but I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time into it. I also wanted to do a thank you Also for the senior graduate parade, I was one of the volunteers, and Councilmember Morgan was there. He was a volunteer as well. And I wanted to say thank you to Kristen and to Rasmussen and to Tennis, who is here, who led putting that volunteer aspect together. We had a lot of fun looking at all the cars and of course being the station. So I just love seeing these opportunities and programs both for residents who want to volunteer and for making our community feel really special. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Next up, I see Tannis.
So I just wanted to say, I'll piggyback on that. On behalf of all of the graduates, I want to say thank you to council for approving our graduate parade, and a special thank you to Kristen for doing such a fabulous job getting it all set up. And as Barb said, tremendous thanks to the police department who kept things running very smoothly, to Public Works who had it all completely cleaned up within like a minute and a half. I think it was a fabulous event, and I would like to advocate, I know it's early, but I think this should be an annual event. I think we should find a way. I've been talking to a lot of people in the community who appreciate being out there. You know, going forward, our seniors are not missing out. So it's not a matter of an instead event. It's a matter of bringing the community together to celebrate. So I've spoken to fourth graders who are looking forward to their turn to go in the parade when they graduate. I've spoken to members of the community who are excited to come out and watch, even though they didn't know any seniors who are graduating. People who met neighbors they didn't know because they had come out to watch at the same time, and it brought them together. I've also heard from some members of the community who have very specific concerns about what could be done differently or reasons not to do it. So I think even though it's early to make a decision to do something like this every year, it might be a good time to start that conversation to see how we could mitigate some of those concerns, bring down the traffic impact, bring down the cost, bring up the participation level, and so forth. So I am happy to volunteer to continue coordinating volunteers and graduate signups. And if that means coordinating it starting now, I am on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Tannis. Next up, I see Mary Zhang has her hand raised as well. Mary?
Yes, thank you, Naomi. My name is Mary Zhang. I live in Mill Creek since 2014. So today I'd like to bring up a proclamation request recognizing Falun Dafa. May I share my screen to provide more details?
I don't
Can you
think
guys hear me?
I don't think there is a way for you to share a screen now.
Let me see.
I was able to make her a co-host, so you can share your screen right now, Miss.
Oh, thank you so much. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Here we go.
Okay, great. So this is proclamation request is recognizing Falun Dafa. So I will first briefly introduce what is Falun Dafa and what Falun Dafa practitioners in Mill Creek area are doing. And finally is the request. So Falun Dafa is an ancient practice system to improve body and mind. It has 5 gentle exercises, including meditation. So it also has 3 core values, namely truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. So these values are transcending culture, social, and national boundaries. Over the years, Falun Dafa has approved to improve people's both body and mind health. And the learn of Falun Dafa is totally free. You could get all the information from falundafa.org. So this picture shows people doing the exercise. So Falun Dafa was first publicly introduced in 1992 by Mr. Li Hongzhi in China. And in 1999, there are already around 100 million people in China were practicing Falun Dafa due to its huge benefits people received. And in the entire world, over 100 countries have Falun Dafa practitioners. So these practitioners are of different races, ages, and professions. So far, Falun Dafa received more than 5,000 recognitions around the world. And the major book of the teaching called Zhuan Falun has been translated into more than 40 languages. And you can also read it free from this website.
Mary, we have 3 minutes. I noticed that your slide shows like 13 minutes long, or 13 slides long. Could you?
Oh, it will be very
get
fast.
your request
Okay.
to
Yeah.
get to the time frame, please?
Okay, give me 1 more minute. So over years, Falun Dafa practitioners in Mill Creek have been actively participating in community activities in Greater Seattle area to share the beauty of Falun Dafa and also foster a more diverse and inclusive culture. So they participated in Seaside Torchlight Parade for many years. These are pictures. And also the Balso Freedom Festival Parade. And also in Magnolia, we attend Summerfest and win the grand prize. So unfortunately, since July 20th, 1999, Chinese Communist Party started persecuting Falun Dafa. So they defamed Falun Dafa in medias like TV, radio, newspaper, brainwashed practitioners and forced them to give up the practice. If rejected, people have been abducted, imprisoned, fired from jobs, expelled from school, forced to do labor work, and tortured. Some people are even being killed, and their organs are harvested to sell so that they could also get money from this persecution. So this persecution is still ongoing even today. So my request this evening is to proclaim July 20, 2021 as honoring Falun Dafa and truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance in the city of Mill Creek. And I attached 2 sample recognitions from the Washington state. Yeah, that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. We will send that over to the city manager and he can bring that before the council for discussion and consideration. Thank you very much. I also see that Tom Young is here and has his hand raised. Welcome, Tom. Name and address, and you have 3 minutes. It's nice to see you this evening.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Nice to see you. Tom Young, 1812 164th Place Southeast in Mill Creek, Winslow neighborhood. No relation to Police Chief Young, but I wanted to provide some comments and support the lady who talked about pickleball. It's a great sport. It's something I've taken up in the last year. I started working part-time and found pickleball as a great way to get some exercise, and the social aspects are there as well. And as she stated, it's really a fast-growing sport. It's grown at over 20% since 2019, and a lot of fun. But we don't have access to courts in Mill Creek. We have a lot of tennis courts and other types of activities are available, but no pickleball courts at this point. It is a multi-generational sport. Men and women play equally, and so I'd like the council to consider her comments and mine in terms of some way finding a way to get some pickleball courts available for Mill Creek residents. And I think that could be done. She mentioned new development, which would be obviously a possibility, but when you look at some of our parks, there's room or some land that exists already in our parks for pickleball courts. The nice thing about them is they're smaller than tennis courts. They're more like badminton size. So they don't take up as much space. And then lastly, as maybe a stopgap measure, because the 2 other options would require some funding. If we could just get paint lines put on the current tennis courts we have, there are actually conversion kits that you can get to allow yourself to play pickleball on a tennis court, but you do need the line markings placed on the court. So would encourage the council to consider that, and wanted to support the testimony on pickleball this evening.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else in the chamber who would like to speak this evening? I do not see any other hands. I'm double checking real quick. I do not see any other hands, so with that, we will end audience communication, and we will move forward into our presentations for the evening, starting with proclamation. Tonight, we have a proclamation for the class of 2021. Whereas the Mill Creek schools and their students have had to transition from physical classrooms to virtual classrooms, and whereas the 2021 graduates have faced the challenges of social distancing head-on and adapted to a new normal as they prepare themselves for their future paths. And whereas the 2021 graduating seniors have encountered unprecedented cancellations of the traditional events that celebrate and honor their years of education. And whereas the city of Mill Creek wishes to acknowledge and show support for the graduating seniors of the class of 2021. And now therefore, I, Mayor Pro Tem Danielle of the city of Mill Creek, on behalf of the city council, do hereby recognize the graduating class of 2021 for their diligent efforts, countless hours of study, triumphant wins, and tearful disappointments that have been experienced during their high school years. Signed this 22nd day of June 2021. Thank you. Next up, we have the financial monthly report with a presentation from our finance director, Laurel Gimzo. Laurel.
All right. Just gonna make sure I have the right screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to start touching base a little bit more often than just quarterly. So we were starting, this is going to be our first attempt at monthly reports. These were posted, I believe, Friday. I think I'm just going to do a brief overview of everything, and then if anyone has any questions, they can follow up. So this is, I had a request for gap statements, and while we are cash basis, I figured we could attempt to make something that is closer to gap for.
Laurel, could I make a request? Could you enlarge this above and by the 66.7% and punch that a little bit for the old eyes in the room? Thank you so much.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, 100% great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So what we're doing is we're starting, this is where our cash balances began. And then we just have the revenue. So all of your incoming funds totaled out here. And then we have all of our expenses here. And then any kind of outstanding items that are still sitting out here. And then this is net that. So you've got revenues and expenses here. So yours are net. And then your total fund balance is down here. So we are looking good right now. I will say that May is when we get our first set of property taxes. So May and November is when we get the majority. So this is higher than normal, but we do have a second quarter fire payment coming out, and that's a bit over $1 million. I would say overall, we're still looking good, especially with COVID. Does anyone have any questions on this specific screen? And I can't see anyone if you do, so I'm sorry.
Nobody has lit up yet, Laurel.
Okay.
You're good.
And then, so if you ever, for future reference, all of your funds are at the top up here. Okay. So then I just wanted to go ahead and start comparing funds. We had mentioned, hey, we want to see where we are in relation to the budget. So we've got the budget based on May numbers, and then we have actuals for 2021, and then where we are in relation to our budget. So the left side is revenues. So everything from here over is revenue, everything from here over are expenses. So I will note, it looks like we are doing really well on property taxes. when I started looking back at prior years, it does look like we budgeted property taxes a little bit lower. And honestly, I think that's a really good idea, just because we did know with COVID, we weren't sure how we were going to be impacted in totality. So that's a really good way to help when other revenue sources are going to be coming in lower, so that it offsets. So that's where in here we've got sales tax and property tax. So all of your taxes in here. And then it just goes through the different funds. You've got your budget, actuals, and then if you're under or over. And in revenues, you do want to be over. That's a great thing to have, a great problem to have. And then on the right, we have expenses. And as you can see, we are under for most things. I do know that staff is still really pushing to try to keep expenses down, just because we're not entirely sure what to be expecting with COVID right now. Does anyone have any questions over this screen? I think down here, this shows your totals. I think so if you want just a brief snapshot, you've got actual revenues versus budget. So we came in pretty close. And then we're quite a bit lower on actual expenses versus budget. Not seeing anyone.
Laura, I have, yes, I have a couple questions. First, I have Councilmember Morgan, and then after him, Councilmember Steckler.
Okay.
Hi, Laurel. Thanks for the updates. We appreciate being constantly updated, nitpicking like that. But I had a question in regards to the surface water utility.
Yes.
Seems like that one is considerably lower. Are we not receiving revenue from expected sources there, or what's the deal?
On that, we do have the state collecting that now. So I am not 100% sure why that's not higher. I will have to look into that. I was actually questioning that right before the meeting.
Great, thanks.
And Councilmember Steckler.
Well, that was my question as well. The surface water fund and also the road improvement fund, whenever we see those actually being under, what's driving that? Are we not collecting, or is it just a timing issue, or those two seem to kind of jump out at me.
Yes, and I will have to get back with you on those. I'm thinking it could be a timing thing, but I need to verify that. So I will look into those and I will get you answers on both of those. Anything else?
I don't think so, Laura.
All right, so then we're just going into the general fund activity overall, and I wanted to give you a picture from 2019 through 21, just because I feel like 2020 actuals are a little bit skewed with COVID. So we are still coming in, as far as taxes go, higher than previous years. We're higher than budget here. If you look here, we are technically still over budget, while our actuals are quite a bit lower on revenues versus prior years. So that is something to note. Okay, so then if you look through expenditures, we are staying under budget and netting. This is actually a good thing, so we're good here. Does anyone have questions over this?
Councilmember Steckler.
Well, first of all, Laurel, this is incredibly helpful having historicals. This is where you see trends. So thank you for doing this. As you say, the expenditures are way down. We'll get into that. I know we'll go further into some of your charts here in a minute, but I want to go back to taxes for a minute, because I'm a little confused on it. I mean, I look back at 2019 where we had 6 million in taxes, and this is a bucket, right, where we have property taxes and other taxes that are in there as well. So there's
Correct.
different drivers in here that, we know property taxes are we know those just go up every year. That's the only one we count. But the other drivers in there are much more fluid, and they go up and they go down. So I look at 19.6 million in 2020, we dropped down to 5.4, which I assume some of that was driven by the COVID and lack of sales tax revenue.
Correct.
And then in 2021, we drive up to 6.1 million, almost 6.2 million, is where we are actually. But what was interesting is, why did we budget 4.9 when in actuality during a COVID year, if we did 5.4 million, would we? I was confused as to why we budgeted 4.9, so much less. Is there something?
So while I did not make the budget, I will say this is a good way to cover any other revenues that you may have overestimated. So I know they had posted like your rec services and your passports at their full amounts. And so this would be a way, kind of just as an insurance policy, like, hey, you know, if your passport revenue and recreational revenue is going to be low and you're, you know, are guessing that things may go back to normal around the first of the year, but then you're like, well, likely it may not, but we're going to go with that. This is a way to offset that difference. And so I'm going to say that's probably why they did that way.
So we had projected passport revenues not down in 21.
Right. Yeah. So passport revenues, actually, I believe I have that in one of the next slides, and you'll see that it actually was projected higher than even previous years. And I know they had planned on starting TSA and TWIC, I believe.
Right.
And the only thing is we haven't been able to because since offices have been closed, there have just been logistics involved. And so we have to make sure that everything will actually work. So that's more than likely why the others were budgeted higher.
Yeah, I can, if through the chair, I would add, Councilman Steckler, that we did indeed base into the budget the assumption that the passport office would open on January 1 of this year, while knowing full well at the end of last year, not being an epidemiologist, we were deeply concerned that that assumption would fall through. And indeed it has, as the next slide will show that.
Yeah, and so this is just an insurance policy basically. And I mean, sales tax could have technically gone down. I know that when the pandemic started, nationally people were told to budget for about a 20 to 30% budget revenue loss. So it was just them being really careful. Okay, did I miss anyone?
No.
Nope, okay. All right, and then this is just a snapshot of your revenues and expenses. Revenues are on top, expenses are on bottom, just so you can see. So the dark is your budget, and then you got 21, 20, and then 19. So you can kind of see where the budgets, where the taxes have been in prior years, and the different revenues easily. And then same thing down here. So you can see down in 2021, our budget is higher than where we're at right now for expenses across the board. All right. Okay, and then on the other funds, there wasn't I don't feel like there was enough activity to really split everything for each individual fund. So we just put the budget versus actuals for revenues and expenses on here. And then I will note on capital projects, we will more than likely be starting things. We do have to get our engineers, and I know we are pretty close to that. So once we have our engineers, we should be seeing more expenses in our capital project funds. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. And so this is just a revenue analysis of the city as a whole. So I'm just gonna go with totals across the bottom. You can see that in 19, we were higher than in 20, so your revenues really took a dive in 20. And then we're doing all right in 2021 compared to 20, but we are below 2019. So you can see up here, property taxes are coming in well, sales tax is great. And so here's that insurance policy we were talking about. They did budget property taxes pretty low. I will say that's a really good idea, especially with COVID. So I would say overall, we're not doing too bad, especially considering everything that everyone else is dealing with. And then down here, this is just a typical chart, so you can kind of see how the property, or not property tax, how the revenue as a whole is broken out across the city. And you can see the property tax is the vast majority of that. Okay. All right, and then this one, I'm probably gonna have to make a little bit bigger. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I did take notes on this one just because I was like, wow, I feel like professional services is really high. So I just wanted to cover what all that encompasses, because it's not just like contract work. So we've got fire service in our professional services. I'm gonna bring this down just a hair. Okay, so in this professional services, you've got fire services, the prosecutor, indigent defense, our domestic violence services. You've got engineering contracts, translation services, animal housing, jail services, dispatch. There's legal in there, telecommunications, and then some software licensing also. So I will say this is gonna be quite a bit larger. It's gonna be about $1 million more next month, just because our fire payment is coming out again for the second quarter. So, and then this is just a breakdown of, you know, where the city spends their money. So I thought that was helpful, especially because I feel like a lot of people have been asking about wages and things. So I thought that was helpful. And then over here, it's just a split of how the general fund monies are broken out. So you can see that police is a vast majority, police and fire is over half of the budget. And then the little different pieces are just the different departments.
Thank you, Laura. Councilmember Morgan has a question.
Thanks, Laurel. My question is in regards to the human resources category. It looks like it was budgeted at 59 and current expenses are 282. So just wanted to see.
Yes. Yeah, so, okay, there we go. So I have been splitting out legal based on what the legal is for. So like the city clerk, I've been putting any kind of public records requests legal in there. And so pretty much anything that has to do with employees or the union, anything like that is going into HR. We are working to split that out. We found a bars code because council had wanted to know if we could split legal out differently. So that's what we're working on. And I'm hoping by next month, we'll be able to have that updated.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilmember Steckler.
Yeah, I resemble that remark, that was me. Hey, I got a quick question for you, Laurel, over here on the right total. So just to make sure I've got this correct, because it looks good. So our year-to-date expenditures, boy, that's tiny, 5.4, it looks like?
Yes.
Okay, and, thank, yeah. Okay, then the adjusted budget, 8.8. The adjusted budget, is that you adjusted year-to-date, so is that what that is? So we should be, year-to-date, we should have been at 8.6, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's really spectacular. We're $3 million under where we should be at this time. And if I'm reading this correctly, the 8.3 and the 9.5, which was, I think, 2020 and 2019, were those also adjusted or are those annual?
These should match. So these should all be based on where we're at now.
Year to date, they're amortizing. Okay, great. That's really great news. I mean,
I will say once, so we've got like a lot of street, well, not necessarily streets, but public works. You've got surface water, you've got a lot of your capital improvement projects. If we had been doing those, I would say that would not be in that spot.
okay, that was my next question, because the last slide you've got coming up here is the one I have the next question on, which is the public work capital improvement project.
Yeah, and I know
Is that related to these departmental expenses that you've got, like legislative, city management, resources, that type of thing?
mhm.
So it does, so that it does bring into account the capital improvement projects, okay. So that's really the eye opener of what's happening with our expenditures when we get to that next slide.
Yeah, so once capital projects are put in, which I fully see that happening, once our other engineers are onboarded, I think those are really going to start increasing, so that gap is not going to be as large. So I just
I'll save my last question for when you get to that slide.
okay. Did anyone have questions on anything else?
I don't see any.
Okay. All right, and then this is just the expense by department. Basically the same as my circle, just a little bit, you can see it by year and by budget. So you can see we're below budget everywhere. And then you've just got 19 and 20 to compare to. All right, and so this, I just thought this would be helpful because I know I had wanted to know what all we were working on, what we had planned, and where we were going to be going. So I know Director Todd and I will be going over this with the engineers to figure out, what we can get done and when. And I know Steckler had a question.
I do, thank you. I just, when I looked at this, it's obvious because of COVID, we've been so hung up with all of our capital improvement projects. Big hold up last year, and now we've got the staffing issue under control. You can see right here that a big chunk of our savings, we haven't had a chance to do our capital improvement projects. So we've got this long list. I was gonna make a request. I think as soon as you're able, this is more really of the city manager of the city, but I would love for the council to get an update on what is realistic to expect in the next 6 months by the end of the year. What can we get done in our capital improvement projects, given where we're at? Because we're basically getting into the back half of 2021 right now. And obviously we're gonna have to, I don't know what can and cannot be done this year. What will that be to be done for next year? But I would love to get an update as soon as possible from the city to the council, hopefully before break, as to what can be accomplished this year. And I know you're working on that right now.
Yeah,
So,
and I do want to point out that with COVID, cities all over, like that was the first thing they were like,
sure.
Capital improvement projects, everything's on hold. Like my last city, that was the first thing to go. We were like, everyone batten the hatches,
Yeah.
we're holding everything. So yeah, I think that's something we definitely can get done.
Right.
And then this little gap, I just couldn't find the project number for these two. So I'm going to be continuing to see if I can find that. All right, and then that is everything I had. If there are no more questions.
Any more questions? I think everyone's good. Thank you, Laurel. That was a great presentation. It's very nice to see our updates more frequently. We really appreciate it. Next up, we are going to move on. We have a presentation from Chief Young, and the whole thing just moved on me, for the police department for our monthly statistics. I'll turn it over to Chief Young now.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening, members of the council, members of the community. I'm going to share my screen real quick here so I can show you what we have for our statistics. And hopefully you're seeing that now.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. So as you can see, our numbers for calls for service, whether dispatched or officer initiated, have gone up consistently over this year. We are currently preparing a yearly statistics update, which will give a 2020, 2019, 2018, and a year-to-date 2021 overview so that you can have a little bit better perspective of what's been going on over the last few years here in Mill Creek. We are noticing currently that we're seeing an uptick in some of our malicious mischief, vandalism, graffiti, and some of the vehicle prowls and other thefts. Fortunately, we have all of our other numbers are down a little bit. We did see a little bit of an uptick in the assaults, probably due to some of the COVID restrictions, but we'll address that later on. But I just wanted to make sure that we were providing you with the most up-to-date information that we have available for you. We are seeing a little bit of an uptick in the call for service area, where we're not getting there as quickly as possible or as quickly as we have been in the past, because we are understaffed a little bit, and we do have some issues where we have a lot more complexity with regard to the types of calls that we're going to right now. We are currently working on that, and we'll come back to you with an update when we have it. Are there any questions?
Councilmember Morgan?
Thank you, Chief Young. I had a question in regards to the outcomes of these arrests and interactions. Do we have any statistics as to sentencing, or what types of offenses lead to what once it hits the court system?
Well, thank you, Councilmember Morgan. Unfortunately, we don't track that type of information, because when we submit a case over, and let's just say for the sake of discussion, it gets pled out or pled down or whatever, we typically don't get a report on that. So it would be difficult for us to go back and find out what exactly that court disposition was. If there was a couple of particular cases that we had in mind, we could certainly follow up on those. But unfortunately, we just don't track that type of data. That would be something that would be kind of at the prosecutorial level or even at the judicial level.
If I might.
Got it, thanks.
If I just might add, that's an interesting point, Councilman Morgan. We may try and follow up with the prosecutor, see if there's some way to provide that data. Obviously, when the prosecutors are in court, they're tracking what's going on, either at a plea or even a sentence. But it's a really good suggestion. I've never seen those statistics correlated, but it ought to be something that's culled from the same data set.
Yeah, if possible, I would greatly appreciate having that juxtaposition there.
Yeah, it may take us some time. Again, I've never seen this done anywhere, but hearing it for the first time, I think it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? I think that's it. Chief, thank you so much for coming before us on a more consistent basis and giving us the statistics so everyone knows what's going on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we are moving on to old business. We have the Art and Beautification Board modification, and I believe that City Manager is going to present that, I believe.
Yes, Mayor, I'm going to get it started. With regard to the background, just very quickly, some of you may recall the city was awarded in 2019 the Historic Preservation Grant. It's an amount of $7,806. The awarded funds were allocated towards the production and installation of the historic panels. If we could back out from that, we can show you the whole perspective of the panels from the establishing shot of the entire bridge, please. The Arts and Beautification Board oversaw this project, the production of the project, and the panels were designed to help preserve Mill Creek's history and serve as both an artistic and historical display. The In early 2021, the 5 completed plaques were installed. That's what's depicted in the photos here. The A and B board has discussed mounting a plaque next to the panels to provide context of what the panels are and recognize the organizations that helped fund the project. What Kristen did, thankfully, was show what that, it's in the bottom left-hand corner. If you look across the 2 parallel horizontal structural members, you'll see at the far left, to the left of the leftmost panel, is a small 8.5 by 11 etched bronze plaque that's being proposed. It's a 1/4 inch thick, and it's intended to be mounted to that aluminum frame on the bottom horizontal framing member, which will be mounted next to that frame of all those panels. The estimated cost is $695. We brought this matter to council, and Naomi, if you could please enlarge the 1 plaque that's on page, there you go. That's an enlargement of what that panel would look like. We brought this to council because we just want to, as a process question, I was thinking about this when we were talking about the governance manual. It's my understanding that the A and B board basically works in advisory capacity to city council. And I thought that this presentation provides all of us with a nuance of how we want to make certain as administrators that we're still fulfilling the will of council. This is less about the money, although $695 is substantial, but the extent it modifies the scope of the original plan, we want to just have a real quick conversation about process, and namely that we believe that it's appropriate in an instance like this to bring it back to council so that you can take a look at what your advisory board, the A and B board, has suggested, and that we would all at least establish common ground. And then with your approval, we would then go ahead and effectuate this recommendation that the A and B board has made to council.
Thank you, City Manager. Anyone have any questions or discussion? Councilmember Bryce?
Yeah, I was wondering, where does this particular fund come out of, out of the budget? Where does this $695 come?
I'll have to defer to our finance director on that.
That would be the Municipal Arts Fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My only question was, I was curious, what has been the precedent in the past when we have put plaques up? What has been on those plaques and how have they looked? Did we look back at that just to get an idea from making this cut?
Mayor Pro Tem Vignal, that's a good question. I'm not clear on what precedence has been. That was part of the reason why we wanted to bring this to council. To the extent it's an advisory board to you as the legislative body, we just wanted to make certain what might have been the precedence. I'm going to ask for input possibly from your colleagues in that regard. But the extent this deviated from the scope, I thought this would be an appropriate time to bring this forward and for us to just clarify what our role as administrators is in mediating between your advisory board and the ultimate recommendations they make. I know that Councilman Steckler works with that board. There may be some additional insights that he can share. And I just want to make certain that we're working in fulfilling City Council's role in moving along these recommendations.
Thank you, City Manager. I'm going to call on Director Todd first, and then I've got Councilmember Steckler and Councilmember Bond. So,
and Mayor Pro Tem, I believe Kristen Rasmussen may have been able to answer some of that question you asked about the history. I'm sorry to interrupt, but if that's appropriate, Kristen, did I interpret your hand raising appropriately?
Oh, sorry, Kristen.
That was my mistake.
So, okay. I'll let Kristen go first and then Director Todd. How about that?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'll use my hand next time on the Zoom. So we did look at the plaques that were in the city. We looked at the plaques for the City Hall North and South dedication. And then we looked at the plaque that was at the Mill Creek Sports Park. The plaques at the City Hall dedication had the city logo. It had verbiage and just acknowledging like, you know, the dedication and it listed the council members that were there at that time, and was the bronze etched plaque as well. The plaque at the sports park had the city logo that was also had funding available to complete that project. So we listed the donors. It said in with the city of Mill Creek in part by, and then it listed, I believe it was the county and the RCO grants as their sponsors. It was a little bit different. It was not a bronze etched plaque. It was more of a metal, but that was to match the plaque that was already installed at the sports park. So when we were making this, we were trying to keep that in mind to be consistent with the look that was already established in the city, to use the city logo and the kind of that branding that had been set.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Director Todd?
I was just going to offer some information. So if, like, for instance, when the county gave us $100,000 for the upgrade at Heron Park, it is a condition of their grant that they will be recognized by a plaque. Same thing with RCO grant many years ago that Kristen was talking about. Well, actually for the upgrade as well. So many times there's a condition of the grant that says thou shalt provide a plaque and an opportunity for us to come to the ribbon cutting or whatever those conditions are. So in many cases, that's what we're doing. In this case, this tourism grant didn't have that requirement.
Okay, thank you, Director Todd. And next was Councilor Steckler.
I was just going to say a lot of the same things that Kristen said. I just want to reflect it for the council's benefit. Kristen got numerous bids from other vendors who've done our plaques before. She was very cognizant of making sure that the graphic standards of what our plaques look like remained, consistent throughout the city. So she examined all these plaques that she just told you about to make sure that this plaque would resemble and look consistent with the look that had already been established by previous directors of marketing and communications in the city. And that I think our original bid was probably significantly higher than this one that she finally got that matches the standards and was considerably lower. So there was a lot of just want to reinforce the good work that she did.
Thank you. Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Mayor. There was a question about historical precedent or whatever, and I just wanted to share that the plaques that were mentioned, as well as there's one other that wasn't mentioned, and that's at Tambar Creek or Tambar Park, which is on 35th south of the city, where the city partnered with the county, and there's a plaque there recognizing the council and the county council members and staff that participated. So there's not a lot of these. These are pretty rare. The ones that have been mentioned are the only ones that I'm aware of, and I just share. Not, it's a good idea. It's not saying it's a good idea or bad idea. Just recognizing the question was precedence, not a lot of them.
Sure. Yes.
I just want to add one other thing. The purpose of this plaque is twofold. It's not just to give recognition to, we do want to recognize the county for what they did and the money that they gave us, but also when you walk up and see these these historical panels, if you don't see anything, you're kind of like, what the heck are these? And you read them and you kind of sort of get it. But the plaque, if you read what Kristen came up with, it tells you the story about this is our history, this is why this was created, enjoy the history, understand where we came from, and what got us to where we are today is the city of Mill Creek. So it's a nice introduction to somebody who walks up and goes, what the heck are these? You read the plaque and it really helps kind of bring the story along and make it better for young people, for new people who just see these for the first time. So the recognition is good, but also it just says, tells you what the heck these things are. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councilmember Morgan?
Hi, yeah, my comment had more to do with the placement of the plaque itself. I like the 5-panel symmetry, the way they're oriented there, and I think the little plaque off to the side kind of unbalances that symmetry. I don't know if below the center one or some other location might just be more pleasing to the eye perhaps. That's all.
Oh, Councilmember Bond, did you?
I did. Just to move this forward, I have no heartburn with this. If there's 3 or more of you that want to go forward, I'm sure we can find the $700 to make this happen.
Yeah, city manager, what were you needing? Do you need a motion or do you just need head nods
Yeah,
or?
we just, head nods are fine. We just want to ensure that this reflects what the council would like. It's a modification of the original plan. You gave us the head nods and we'll get her done. We'll get it done.
Just to make it formal, I make a motion that we approve the purchase of this plaque not to exceed $700. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. So moving on to the next piece. Sorry, my iPad died. So the next piece is,
It'll be item G, Mayor.
oh yeah, okay, sorry. Item G, we need to request a motion to ratify the adoption of resolution number 2021-603 to be resolution number 2021-604. This was the adoption of the government's manual, and resolution number 2021-602 to resolution number 2021-603. Addendum number 3 to contract number 2019-1504 with OTAC due to a scrivener's error and authorize the city clerk to amend the record to reflect the correct resolution numbers.
So moved as stated.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Quick discussion, are we just changing numbers? That's all script. That's all we're doing?
Yeah.
No,
That's correct.
just want to clarify.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Next, we'll move on to proposed new initiatives. A proposal from the Art and Beautification Board for lending libraries and city parks. I believe the city manager, I think this is up to you again.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this is a part of a clarification on process. This excellent idea that's been proposed. Again, working with the A&B board that advises the council, we support this A&B board administratively. We wanted to be able to bring back this under the proposed new initiative so that the entire legislative body can hear it. And again, we want to solicit your input on this and obtain direction. The idea is to install a free book sharing library where anyone may be able to take a book or share a book. This would function on an honor system, but be supervised by a library steward or stewards to maintain the smooth functioning and tidy appearance of the library. Free libraries are a valuable cornerstone of any healthy community. And these libraries, lending libraries, are like many little libraries that would be located throughout the community. The areas that are being considered for possible installation include Exploration Park, Hillside Park, and Buffalo Park. The A&B board has proposed these locations due to the proximity of families living in the nearby neighborhoods, decent foot traffic and visibility, and the potential for a variety of members in our community to enjoy the library. We did want to at least show you on the slides what the lending libraries can look like and the ones that are being proposed for our community. We just didn't want these popping up without the entire council hearing and just giving us an informal nod of the head for the go-ahead. The pricing on these for an unfinished little free library with no custom sign is $289. A composite 2-story gray little free library is $359. If we want to customize it with signage, it can be up to roughly about $50 for 3 lines. The A&B board will assemble the libraries, and then our public works team will install them in the parks. It's my understanding that there will be a shared a responsibility with the maintenance, the cleaning and the upkeep of the lending libraries.
Thank you, City Manager. Anyone have any, Councilmember Cavallari?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if I agree or disagree. I just really don't know enough about this shared learning depository or whatever we're going to call it. Do we have samples or templates, or has this been successful or non-successful in other cities? Again, I just honestly just don't know enough about it.
Councilmember Stecker?
Yes, if I could offer just a few more comments about this, just a little more background information. The idea of a lending library is not new. It's being done by a number of cities. You'll see these around if you go drive around in Linwood or somewhere else, you'll see what these little boxes look like. And there was a member of the Arts and Beautification Committee board that brought this idea forward, gosh, back when Councilmember Briles was chairman of that committee, that she had the idea of a lending library. We're all like, what the heck is that? And over the years, this idea has gotten more legs, more people have done it. And then what really started to blossom was, you see these boxes here. She found these are made of Hollywood. I guess it's that, the Trex lumber that doesn't mold, doesn't mildew, and you have those wood boxes that bugs and stuff would get into. And so now they come with these pest-free, mold-free type of boxes, which really preserve the books and everything. And so they've had some much greater success with them. And so that started to get some legs going. And what's really kind of special about this is it was an idea that started in the Arts and A&B board, but then they went over and asked the Milk Creek Parks Board if we could put these in the parks. That seemed to make the most sense. People take their kids to the park, maybe have books in there that are kids' books. You could pull out and kids could read, or maybe adult books that adults could start reading, take them with them, and then come back and leave them at any Mill Creek lending library. We didn't know if the public would grasp onto it, so we don't want to build 20 of these in 20 different parks. So the idea was start with 3. And these are, Exploration Park was a great one to start with, the theme of the park and everything else. And these other 2 are just some other ones. And then one of the members of Arts and Beautification went to Friends of the Library. And Friends of the Library did some research, and they've agreed to fund all the books. They're going to supply all the books with these. So nobody has to worry about collecting the books for it. And then they went to the Kiwanis Club of Mill Creek, who has said that they will be responsible for monitoring these things, refilling them, making sure they get vandalized or if the books get kind of away. So we're trying to create something that isn't a hindrance on the city. But we would start with these 3, put them in 3 parks. Arts and Beautification wants to purchase a consistent look. They're going to pick one box, one color, order 3 of them. So when you start to see these around Mill Creek, you're driving by, you're going to go, oh, that's the Mill Creek Lending Library. Okay, I know what that funny little box is. And then Public Works agreed to install them for the board because these are going to go in our city parks. We want to make sure they're installed properly and permanently and in the right areas. And so the city will install them, but we're trying to make sure we don't put a hindrance on the city employees. But it's an extra service. Now, this is just 3. We start with this. Might be a bust. Might be really nice. Maybe who knows? A year from now, the AD might be back and ask for 3 more. And I know this question is going to come up too. The funding would come from that same fund that A&B pulls from, which is the Municipal Arts Fund. And the funding is there for these 3, just these 3. And all that you see up there, the library post topper kit and all that. There will also be signage on that box stating that this is made possible by the city of Mill Creek and the Friends of the Library. And so it really helps to reinforce that we're doing something for the community. There'll be a sticker on the side that says Kiwanis is responsible. If you see any problems or need more books, contact the Kiwanis Club. They'll have their email address. So it's a new idea to create a community service. And again, it may not work. It may be great, but they are alive and well in other cities and have been well received. But there is the negative of they have a tendency with the old wooden boxes they originally came out with, turn into bug infested, nasty mold, crappy things. So that was one of the things that kept it down. Is we've been talking about for a number of years now, about 3 years before we got to this point.
Okay, I have Councilmember Griles and then Councilmember Cavallari after that.
Yeah, I do have a question about it. The question is, if you have these three, if we're authorizing three, is the plan that they would all be purchased and ordered at the same time, delivered, put up, all like within some short amount of time, so that they're all up and everything? Because I know we've got some other projects that are still kind of in the works and have taken some time. So I wanted to, if we're putting them up, I want to have all three up.
Thank you, Councilmember Cavallari.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for bringing this forward. I like these kind of fun novelty ideas that really connect the community. I'm not on either side of it. I just, there's a lot of questions. What happens if one's vandalized? What happens next? Someone decides to spray paint. They start getting mold. I mean, a million variables. I just don't have answers to it. I like where your heart's at. When it comes to parks and open space, I'm a huge fan. I'll support it on the notion that they're going to purchase and install, and we'll try it. And I think probably the best avenue for this is to call it a pilot project, and this way, we can have a sunset here and see at the end of the year, see if it works, or if it doesn't, go from there. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember Bond, and then I have few words.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll start with I'll support it. I like the pilot project thing. I'm very familiar with the city of Sultan. They have these. I've never seen somebody use it in 5 years. I'm not aware of anybody using it, but they exist. Other communities exist. My mom lives in Edmonds. I've seen them in Edmonds. I've never seen anybody use them. If they're being used, that would be great. If this small group of people find some value in this, I would call it a win. Even though it's going to cost us a few bucks, it may not pencil, they're just too small. But in the bigger picture, I like the idea. I know that people can be bad sometimes. So who polices the content? So what happens when a 9-year-old goes in there, some 40-year-old stuck his old Playboys in there or something? Who polices this? Or a book that maybe mom doesn't want her 12-year-old reading. I don't know. So these are things that run through my head, kind of worst case scenarios, obviously, and perhaps not even of value, but that's one. Is it going to be used? Because we are talking about a few bucks here. What is it, around 3,000? Yeah. Not the end of the world, but especially if it's getting used, people are allowed to leave books, right? They can. So again, it's one thing with the library saying we're putting these. I'm sure the library would use some sense of, okay, these books are suitable for all audiences, but somebody else might not, and somebody else might think this book's fine for a 14-year-old, and another person might go, no way, that's not appropriate for a 14-year-old. So good people can sometimes disagree on what's appropriate for, let's say, minors. So I'm just saying I have a few concerns, but like the pilot project thing, we can take a chance on it, try and get some feedback, see if there's some value in it. But I do have concerns.
Thank you. I see you, Councilor Stickler. I have some things I want to say first, and then I'm going to call on Kristen, and then I'll get to Councilmember Stickler. I have some concerns. I actually love the idea. I really love these, and I see them all the time. Like when I go to Kirkland, they're like on the side of the streets in different neighborhoods, and it's really cute. It's really fun. The part that I am having a problem with is putting them in our parks. As the mother of a 7-year-old, I'm not sure that I would like to know where exactly in the parks we are putting them. And I don't know that we as adults sit back and think about the places in our local parks that our children are playing. Someone put a sign up in our park over the weekend in a place that does not seem like kids would play, and my daughter cried because it's actually where they go up and they pretend to have a clubhouse and they play every single day and somebody put a sign there. So I'm concerned, where are we wanting to put these in the parks? And is it somewhere that we don't realize that the 7 and 8 year olds in our community are playing? Because they do go into some of these other areas and play their little clubhouse things. And I wouldn't want it to be in their way. So I would want to look at where we're actually placing them. And I am concerned about cluttering up our parks. Our parks are beautiful, and this is, to me, if we're going to start adding things into the parks, it starts to take away from it. So I'm actually for the libraries. I'm just not comfortable putting them inside our parks. And then I have another multitude of questions as the mother of a 7-year-old. What's going to happen when the 7 and 8 year olds start getting in there and taking the books out and doing things with them? And I can see them be hitting each other over the head with them. They're going to be throwing them. There's going to be a multitude of things that I don't think us as adults are thinking about. The 7 and 8 year olds are going to be thinking about these books. So for me, I would really want to know and have a better understanding exactly in the park, where are we talking about putting them? And I think I would actually be more in favor of having them somewhere else in the city that's not in our parks, and set a precedent of putting things in the park. Next, I'm going to go ahead and call on Kristen and then Councilmember Steckler.
Thank you. So just two kind of quick comments to your statements. So we did talk about maintenance of the books and who would help take care of that, because we did not want it to be a burden on staff or an extra responsibility. So Councilmember Steckler talked with some of the other volunteer organizations. Sorry. And the Kiwanis Club has volunteered to pick to service it weekly, and they'll rotate that with their members. They can task their high school volunteers to monitor, go through the books, see if there's, inappropriate things, if they're ruined or whatnot. They also have a storage unit that they can store extra books that are donated by the Friends of the Mill Creek Library. So when things get old or it's looking low in supply, they have a source to restock it. The kind of how it came up to be proposition to be placed in our parks is a resident had emailed me about getting in touch with the Mill Creek Community Association, and she'd wanted to do a lending library, and the Mill Creek Community Association said that they aren't able to do that. So I was like, well, I knew if the board had been talking about it. So they had brought this idea forward, and I was like, oh, and there's a resident interested, and this is what they said. So we knew that was not an option to do in the MCCA areas. There might be in other areas or other locations if we decide not to do it in a park, but just wanted to give you that context that had been looked at before and wasn't an option. So it was just some more context for you on the library.
Thank you. Councilmember Steckler.
These are all great questions. I wanted to kind of, I don't have a crystal ball in all of them, but just give you some feedback from what the board had discussed over the years. The question of is it going to be used is probably the reason why it's taken 3 years to get here. Nobody can answer whether that's going to be used. So we're going to this with eyes wide open. It's a test. It's, it may be wonderful. It may not be used. People may not want it. It is a test. So don't know. But part of
what are your thoughts on trying one and then see?
I'm
sure you talked about.
We talked about that as well. It's part of it was getting part of the challenge here is what is that little box and what does it do? So when you have 2 or 3, you have a little bit of awareness of what it is and what it does. And hopefully our friends in the media are going to help us out, get the word out when they get out. And like I said, when you see the same green box or whatever color we choose, or they choose for the city, you're going to know what that box is. That's the goal here. That's the Mill Creek Lending Library box. And that also led to the location question of They talked about putting it in various strip malls or town centers, but the locations where there's a chance for people to stop and enjoy the green spaces and maybe even read a book or read a book to your child really lended itself to parks. And so the AV board went to the Parks Board and said, what do you guys think? Because really you control parks. And they were like, yes, we see this as a great addition to the park. So they were very supportive. The vandalism, yes, that was one reason we don't want wood. They go from the spray painting, that kind of thing. Polymer wood, one of the beauties of it is it does get vandalized. It doesn't soak in. You can use that paint removal on the plastic, the glass, and the easy clean, comes right off. The control of the books, that was another question. We need to have somebody checking these out on a weekly basis. Every week, somebody has to go to those boxes. You brought up the question, what's a bad book? We talked about putting videotapes in there for about 10 seconds, and they said, no, we're not videotapes. We're talking about old CDs. Talking about putting CDs in there, and so he said, no, you can't control CDs. No, you're not going to put CDs in there. It's never going to happen. It's going to be books. But the question did come up, what if somebody puts bad books in? As part of Kiwanis' job is to also look and see if somebody put junk in there, garbage in there. What if a little kid goes in reaching for a book and there's an old sandwich in there, something shoved in there? But these things need to be maintained to make sure there's not a horrible experience. And the Kiwanis Club has agreed to assign it to their membership. They've embraced it to do a weekly inspection of every single box. So they'll take this on and do that to control the books, to handle vandalism and make sure. Parks, we might find another location after this that might be better. But this is a test of a service to the community. But I do have to commend that. What I really liked most about this, which really made me the happiest, was this came up from volunteer citizen groups. This didn't come from anybody except volunteers. The Arts and A&B Board, the Parks Board, the Friends of the Library, Kiwanis. That's really pretty cool that this all came from volunteer citizens. Yeah, the city's paying for it though. The city is putting the bill for it. So yeah, let's give some kudos to the city. We're gonna write the check. But all the people that came up with the ideas, it's pretty cool that it's coming from the citizens. So great questions, everybody. Great concerns. And that's part of what kept this thing in May for a few years before we ever got to here.
Councilmember Kevin.
Thanks, Mayor. The only issue is that I just seem to have more questions now that everybody has spoken regarding content management. I appreciate and I'm very thankful that Kiwanis Club is willing to take that on, but a weekly visit is probably not enough to monitor content going in and out. And Mayor Pro Tem Vignal's comments about kids getting in there, it could put the city in a bad spot too. I have a lot of questions. So I would make a motion to support what you're saying here and try maybe doing one here at City Hall. If Kiwanis is still willing to do that, try that as a pilot program and see how it goes from there.
If I could, I know that there's a number of groups out there that really want to move forward and appreciate your thoughts, but they really want to move forward with their project. We can shoot it down, but they want to do the test. They want to do it in parks. So I think what I would ask first is, before we go to that, is I'd like to make a motion. I don't know if I'll get a second or not, even if I'll get a vote, but I'd like to make a motion to go ahead and do a test of the Mill Creek lending libraries with the three initial lending libraries in 3 Mill Creek parks installed by the city to make sure they're installed in the right location, installed properly, and on a test basis to see how it would work per the motion you have in front of you here, the requirements of the customization, sign, dollar amounts, and everything else. So I would like to make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Oh, you have a discussion?
Oh, yeah, sorry, discussion. Thanks. Discussion.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I like I said, I support the idea and I really appreciate where your heart's at. It's not for a lack of effort here that we're at this point, but I don't think I'm going to support it until I have some answers. One victim or one potential victim would be too much. We try to really micromanage these things before we launch them, and we dissect them as much as possible to contemplate all the what ifs, and I just don't think we've done that here. So on that basis, I'm not going to support 3 of the moving parts.
Councilmember Morgan.
Similarly, I think it's a great idea. Since it is a pilot idea as a concept, I think I would be more in favor of starting with one. It's not an idea that's new to a lot of people that are park goers, so if it's going to be adopted, it will, and then we can expand it from there. But I think one might be a good starting point, jumping ground for us.
I think, I actually still would prefer not to be in the park. I would prefer that we would find a different location. And that's where I guess I'm gonna fall on this one. I do love the idea. I'm very much a library supporter. I'm very much the little libraries, they are so cute. And they build community and I love the idea of them. I just don't like the idea of placing them in our park. So I would prefer that we would find another location. I'm not comfortable with agreeing to put them in the park. So that I will be voting no for the parks. Councilmember Bond.
What?
Sorry, did I go the wrong way?
What's that?
Sorry, I didn't.
Okay. If it passes, fine, I'm not going to sleep over it, but I'm gonna be a no. I think I'm just not seeing them. It's a great idea in principle, that I just don't think we're gonna get the value out of it. I'd actually rather take the $3,000 and restripe the tennis courts for the, at least we know there's 3 or 4 people that want to play pickleball. I don't know how many people want to use the little mini library. Thank you.
Councilmember Second.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a couple of comments here. We ask citizens to volunteer for committees. They put in a lot of extra time on those committees. And I find this, the amount of time that they put into whatever their particular committee is, in case of the Arts and Beautification Board, they're trying to do things to help beautify our city. And we are a group of 7 individuals up there, and we all have 7 individual personal opinions. We may not always agree on things, but if we empower citizens to take care of our parks or work on our design review or our planning, and we give them budgets, which we did with the Arts and Beautification, said, here's your budget. And don't spend any more than this, but do your projects. Here's your budget you have to deal with. In the past, and I've been on this committee for 4 years, when they come up with projects that are within their budget, they've gone with them. And now they're doing a project within their budget and something they feel very strongly about. And I respect all of your personal opinions, but they are very personal about, as I have my own personal opinion. I really don't have a personal opinion about the library. I have a personal opinion about the committee that put this thing together and the citizens that want to support it. And I think it sends a wrong message that I don't see this as the end of the world if we spend $3,000 to try to do something that the citizen groups have come up with to beautify the city, to provide an additional service not everybody's gonna agree with this. Not everybody's gonna think making libraries a great idea. I think we've answered questions about vandalism and, the maintenance of the books and the quality of the books and how they're gonna be maintained. But it just seems like, I just think it's gonna be a terrible message to send out to citizens that volunteer and work for years on a project and then be told, nah, we just don't think it's that great an idea. So before you ever come up with another idea, you better get council approval before you go down the road with it. That just seems to be a rather poor message to send out. If they've gone outside of their guidelines, outside of their budget, outside of what their responsibility was, I could see that point. But they didn't. And I think it's a bad message not to support our citizens and what they want to do when they are following the guidelines that we told them to follow. So I'm going to vote yes. I know I hear a lot of you saying you're not going to, but I think that's a huge mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Steckler. Appreciate your thoughts. I just want to say I don't really appreciate, as the mother who does have her 7-year-old at the parks almost every single day, actually using them. That the fact that my thoughts on how my daughter uses the park on a daily basis and how she feels about it are irrelevant. And that by thinking that I'm not taking into consideration what our volunteers have to say and what they would like to see, because I very much appreciate what they have to say. And I think this is an excellent idea. I just do not see it in the parks. And I am using the park, and that opinion is a valid opinion. So thank you. Did anyone want to call the question? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Nevler.
Thanks, Mayor. Councilmember Stecker, I absolutely appreciate where your heart's at. I think I said it a number of times, and I absolutely appreciate the advisory boards, but at the end of the day, they are exactly that, advisory boards. This isn't trying to puff up my chest or anything. It is our job as council members up here. When they bring something forward, it is our role to micro dissect them into what could be liability for the city, what could be harmful to children and with parents, or just be a distraction from the intended users. That's our role and that's our function. So I don't think we're doing a disservice. We're doing our jobs up here when we have these dialogues in public and make sure that the 7, all of us get heard and have a vote. Thank you.
Anyone want to call the question? I guess all those in favor of motion.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Yeah.
Nay.
Nay. I didn't get who. Okay, any abstentions? Okay, motion does not pass. Okay, motion does not pass, thank you. Sure.
So even though I did vote no on it today, I think this is a good idea that's worth fostering and moving forward with on planning and addressing some of the issues that council brought up today. So this isn't the end, it's just a stepping ground to more thoroughly looking at the issue.
Thank you, Councilmember Morgan. I agree. I would actually like to see some recommendations for some other locations to come back before the council, because I think it's a great idea. Now we are moving on. Next up, we have a proposal from the Park and Recreation Board to purchase signage for city parks for updating and replacement purposes. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll get us started here. The Parks and Recreation Board conduct an annual park tour. During the park tour of 2020, the board members noted that the city's parks and current way of finding signs were either inconsistent in terms of their markings or absent altogether from some of our parks. The board members have worked to identify and locate the current park signage when and where available, and made recommendations for either new or additional park signage as needed. The intention is to have uniformity with regard to how the signs designate the parks in the land it represents. The Park and Recreation Board made a mock-up design for future signs to include the name of the park and identifying language to designate it as a City of Mill Creek Park. Kristen, I believe in this slideshow we have, if you could pull that up on the screen, please.
Okay, can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
perfect.
if you move to the next slide.
Oops, sorry.
No, I appreciate it. So this is an example of an existing sign. We want to update.
Yes,
we want,
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's all right.
So the Parks and Rec board took pictures of all the signs. So this was an example of one of the signs. And so it is, as City Manager Michael was saying, does not indicate if it's a city park, or it's a Mill Creek Community Association park, and not all of the parks had signs leading to them. Some of them were placed like right as you're supposed to turn, or they're hidden. Some of our newer parks, Buffalo Park, Exploration Park, don't have any signage. So they were just kind of wanting to look at it to make it consistent and then add park signs if they were missing.
So on the next slide, we advance to slide 3. That's an example of what the Parks and Recreation Board is proposing for larger streets like 132nd Avenue and Bethel Everett Highway, a larger sign measuring 18 by 24, on the smaller residential roads, 12 by 18. And the goal is for us to order a total of 30 of these signs. The price estimate for 30 is approximately $1,100. With estimations for additional supplies and staff time, we're estimating that the total project cost is under $5,000. Kristen, do we have a listing of, yeah, let's move to that slide next. This is an example of what the Parks and Recreation Board found and is recommending with regard to placement of signage. The blue star notes the old sign placement, and then the red stars indicate where is being proposed that the newly designed signs would be installed. And I believe there's a list of the locations, Kristen.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I did not include that in the PowerPoint. So we did this for each of the parks, and let's see, I believe I have that. We did that for each of the parks, and we worked with Director of Public Works, Mike Todd, and Public Works Supervisor Matthew Combs to make sure that these were able to be installed. Some of them we had put on private property, or were recommending to go on private property, or it was the county. So they helped us make sure that they were on city property, that they were legal and met all of the code recommendation, the codes that we needed to meet to put up a sign.
Question for you, Chris. Mm-hmm. So these are signs that we're going to put up to direct people to city parks.
Correct.
There's not going to be directions to privately owned parks.
Correct.
Okay. I'm fine with city parks and helping people find their parks. I don't want to participate in directing people to private.
Understood.
Councilmember Keller had a question too.
Thanks, Kristen. I don't have a question there. I just was going to speak in support of the project, if that's all right.
Oh, yes, sorry.
So first, let me say thank you to everybody involved, but more importantly, Melissa Duque, who's the chair of the Parks Board, and her very insistent and zealous nature. I appreciate it. She brought this project to me or to the Parks Board some time ago. And it was kicked around with the group for many months, design, costs, Kristen and Matthew Combs have been instrumental in getting the cost down as minimal as possible and the placement as accurate as possible. She saw a need for the city where the signs were either missing or dilapidated, and created a fix. And so the board had a chance to go over as far as what the designs might look like, what was legal, what size was appropriate. And this is what we've come up with. I think it's roughly 30 signs, or actually a little bit less, but should be done by end of year according to Matthew Combs. And I absolutely support this project. It's a great idea. It enhances the parks, the facilities, and how to get there, and just where they're at. It's a great idea, and a lot of hard work has been put into it, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cavallari. Kristen, I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted your presentation. Did you have anything else to say?
Oh, no, thank you.
Anyone else have any thoughts?
So we don't normally engage the audience, but if permission, if you'd like to bend the rules, we have an audience member who would like to speak.
Thank you.
Yes, you're recognized. Sure.
I didn't realize that. Thank you for letting me speak. I just had an idea with the branding consistency to have that logo on the podium, just for consistency's sake throughout all of the endeavors with Mill Creek's branding. And I think that would probably, with no extra colors, it'd be a great addition to the sign.
Thank you. I actually was thinking the same thing at the exact same moment that I saw it. It would be really nice to have the logo on there. I don't know if there's a reason that they did not recommend putting the logo on there. Did anyone want to speak to why we didn't put it on there?
Yeah.
Director Combs, I believe, said it's probably not the place for a city logo on the parks for a directional to a park. It's not an official city sign. It's just a directional. And we also try to keep cost in mind and printing costs down. So, but thank you.
Okay, that makes sense. Anyone else?
Sure, I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion to, I guess, support the park signage as discussed here in council. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Duque and the entire Parks Board and Director Combs and Kristen for all the work that you've done on this. I just called. Thank you. Next up, we have a study session. Moving on to the study session with for Dawson River Church Cook Properties for concept development. And we have a facilities survey report with Karen Reed, our consultant. So I will turn it over to Karen. Oh, there she is. I wasn't seeing her screen. It's all you, Karen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's Karen Reed here. Tonight is another installation of information about the potential range of options for the future development of the DRCC properties at the north end of the city. And before I go further into this, I want to introduce Heather Logan, who is, at least on my screen, she's down towards the bottom. Heather is a communications consultant based in Arlington. And I was really pleased that she had some time and was able to help us out on this effort. So with that, and she and I will be tag teaming through this presentation tonight. And Mike Todd is going to be running the PowerPoint. In your materials for your council packet, you have a 29-page report from us, which has a short template of information about 15 facilities selected by the City Council back in May for us to explore a bit further. And tonight's presentation will not replicate all the data in that report, but we'll try to touch on a few highlights as we go forward tonight in the interest of time, if that's okay. Mike, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So we're going to present sort of the list of facilities again and some highlights of the information that we found and offer to answer any questions that you may have as we go along. And then at the end, we'll discuss our next steps. Next slide, please. Just a quick recap. This will look familiar to you. Back in February, we approved some tasks for an initial phase of exploration work here. And then also in February, the council adopted the 6 guiding principles for how you would like to see as service sort of guidelines for how we proceed with this inquiry. Just up there as a reminder. Next slide, please. We came back in March and April and talked about a project calendar. The project calendar notably does not have any dates because these projects usually take several years to accomplish, and it's hard to know at this point what the precise schedule will be, but we can anticipate some phases of the project. We launched a community survey, as you may recall, back in March, and we got 1,210 responses from the community. We presented the results of the survey to you in early April. And after that, we had a brainstorming session with you to think about mixed use of the property, since mixed use was one of the principles that you had. And that discussion identified 5 sort of general types of facilities that you were most interested in, which also sort of reflected what we heard from the community survey. Next slide. So what we did in May is we came back with a set of potential facilities for us to dig just a little bit deeper in and bring back some information. And after discussion with you, these were the 15 facilities that we followed up and studied on your behalf. And that study took the form of, next slide, so telephone calls and online research, sort of trying to track down these sort of high-level questions with respect to these facilities. So hopefully all this looks familiar. And with that, I'm just gonna sort of give a recap of some of the sort of observations that we took away and some caveats here. The information that we collected and that is in the report is pretty high level, and it's not a complete picture of any facility. We were not able to answer all of the questions because some folks just didn't have the information that we were looking for. In some cases, we couldn't even find a person to talk to with some of the smaller facilities that were operated by small nonprofits. We have surveyed just a limited number of facilities in each of these categories. So obviously the information that we found may not hold true for all facilities of each of these types. With respect to the community centers we looked at, all of them were operated by their respective city owners. All of them involved ongoing operating costs, of course, and all of those operating costs were offset in part by revenues generated at these facilities. With respect to the Boys and Girls Club facilities that we looked at, some of those could provide some amenities that are similar to community centers, but they're pretty booked up with Boys and Girls Club activities. Most of those facilities were similarly structured on public land, with the facility being constructed and owned by the Boys and Girls Club. The Snohomish County Boys and Girls Club, we spoke to their director about 2 facilities they have in Snohomish County, and he emphasized that the Boys and Girls Club here is very flexible in how they approach these clubs and how the construction and ownership works. So these are just examples. Another couple takeaways, facilities operated by small nonprofits did notice some challenge in maintaining volunteers to operate and support the needed work at facilities. The performing arts centers that we looked at, all like the community centers, all required some level of ongoing public support, but also defrayed a chunk of their ongoing operating costs through revenues generated at the facilities. Finally, I'll say that the owners and operators with whom we spoke are all enthusiastic advocates for the facilities that we spoke to them about. So they all felt that they were providing great benefit for the community, and they were happy to be engaged with those facilities and working with them. So with that, unless there are questions, I'm going to go to the first tranche of facilities that we looked at, and Heather and I are going to tag team based on who did the interview for each of these types of facilities, and we're just going to flag a couple of notes from the survey that we thought were sort of meaningful. We're going to take this at a pretty high clip, But as at the end of each of these facilities, if you have questions you want to ask, feel free. And we can also come back at the end as well. So the Boys and Girls Club at the Hidden Valley Park in Bellevue is about 21,500 square feet. It has 4 gymnasiums, a meeting room, an office space, and some outdoor seating. The Boys and Girls Club owns and maintains the field house, and they paid for the construction, which was approximately $8,000. The city of Bellevue and the Boys and Girls Club split the cost of the site improvements, which was about $6 million in total. The city maintains the fields and the parking lot. The Boys and Girls Club maintains the field house. There's a long-term 50-year land lease for $1 a year underlying the facility. The city has reserved the right to use the Boys and Girls Club facility for 70 hours a month. That's 70 court hours a week. And the city's annual maintenance cost on this facility, which is of a similar size as the DRCC parcels, is about $270,000 a year. And that's all I was going to say about that one. So I may not be able to see you if you have a question, so feel free to interrupt me if I'm going on and you had a question that you wanted to ask.
Karen, Councilmember Cavallari has a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, Karen. I'm sorry, I missed the initial investment from both the private partner and the city on this project. Can I have that?
The construction cost was just under $8 million for the field house itself, and the site improvements were about $6 million in addition. And I would note that was opened in 2015. So I'm glad you raised that question, in part because the construction costs, we did not inflate them forward because it was really a fruit basket of different types of costs that we had. Some included land, some included site development, others didn't. Some were built in an existing facility and a renovation of an existing facility. So it's really, really different. And we have facilities going back, I think, all the way to 1929. So the construction costs, especially the older ones, should be taken with a grain of salt. I think the Boys and Girls Club estimated that if they were going to try to do this facility again this year, it would cost somewhere between $10 and $11 million. That was their guesstimate. So does that answer the question, Councilmember?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Heather now.
I'm sorry, I had a question too.
Yeah.
That $8 million, that was just a field house, right? That was paid for by Boys and Girls Club, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the site improvements, that was a 50-50 split between Boys and Girls Club and the city, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the city paid for that out of, was it just?
Cash.
Yeah, but it was, city's portion was cash financed totally? Okay. So was that, by that you mean it was a bond?
No, they just had ongoing park and recreation reserve and capital funds. They dedicate their entire sales tax in Bellevue to support their CIP. And so they have a pretty healthy tranche of money to avoid issuing debt for smaller projects, which this would have been for them.
For the capital investment of the site improvements,
yeah,
not the operation. Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Okie doke, I'm going to turn it over to Heather now to speak about the Arlington Boys and Girls Club. And the next slide, please.
Absolutely. I'd like to start by saying, Mayor and members of council, thank you for your time tonight. The Arlington Boys and Girls Club, I'm going to contrast it with the Mukilteo Boys and Girls Club because it's very interesting how the Snohomish County Boys and Girls Club, how they make their deals. So in Arlington, the facility is owned by the city of Arlington. It's operated by the Boys and Girls Club. It originally opened in 1992 for $600,000, all of which was private donations. And they had a major expansion in 2015 for $1.5 million, bringing their total square feet in Arlington to 26,000 square feet. Their phase 2 that opened in 2015 was state funds received after the Oso landslide, 2 Snohomish County Community Development Block grants, a large Rotary Club gift, and private donations. The city contributed nothing to the construction costs. The city also has no role in operations. In fact, they're contractually obligated to mow the fields, but the Boys and Girls Club finds it easier to do that themselves rather than coordinate through the city's scheduling to have maintenance and operations come out and do that. Their annual operating budget is $450,000 in Arlington. Anybody have any questions before I move on to Mukilteo?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, so in Mukilteo, the deal is different. The building is owned by the Boys and Girls Club and it's operated by the Boys and Girls Club. It opened in 2018 for $3.5 million and it has 18,000 square feet. The Boys and Girls Club really considers their sweet spot for size to be 18,000 to 35,000 square feet. Of the $3.5 million, the city did contribute $500,000 toward those construction costs. The club financed $1.8 million in debt. They really prefer to stay away from debt, but they wanted to get this club open. And the other $1.2 million came from state grants. The owner, meaning the city where it is, Mukilteo, so I shouldn't have said it's the owner. The city of Mukilteo has no say in what goes on at this club because they don't own it or operate it. The annual operating budget is $900,000. And for both clubs, Mr. Sakalis, who is the executive director, said to keep in mind that if you construct the building to DSHS standards, if you chose to, Boys and Girls Club does not offer any scholarships, but if the building is constructed to DSHS standards, then DSHS will pay the fees or tuition for that entire universe of kids, meaning DSHS beneficiaries, to come to the clubs. And it's something that's much easier to do when you're constructing it than reconstruction after the fact. Any questions on Mukilteo?
Councilmember Stecker?
Yeah, it appears to me that both Arlington and Mukilteo, 100% of the operating costs are paid for by Boys and Girls Club. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the last part of the question?
Oh, in the case of Arlington and Mukilteo, 100% of the annual operating expenses are paid for by the Boys and Girls Club. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So in both these cases, then it seems like none of these Boys and Girls Clubs have an ongoing expense or burden on the city as to operating expenses. Is that correct?
The Boys and Girls Club rolls it into their budget, and
yeah,
I'm not entirely sure about Mukilteo, but I'm confident that Arlington, other than maintaining a relationship with the club, does not have ongoing costs. Now they do have what I'd characterize, a sweet deal. They have a 35-year land lease for $1 a year with a 15-year extension. So similar to the 50 years that Karen mentioned for Bellevue. But other than the land being used for very little, the Boys and Girls Club in Arlington means that the Parks and Rec feature is provided by the Boys and Girls Club instead of by the city.
So really what they're looking, it appears from your analysis here, you said Boys and Girls Club wants land. And if we can provide the land in a long-term lease, $1 a year, they will fund it. Some cases the city funds a little bit, like 500 million or 500,000 in one case. But in most of the times they're raising the funds and they're covering the operating expenses as well.
Yes.
So that's an eye-opener. Thank you. I just want to clarify that.
You're absolutely correct. And Mr. Tsoukalos was very clear that what has worked in this town, that town, or the other town, the Boys and Girls Club is willing to be very flexible if this is what the city wants to do.
Thank you. Just want to clarify that.
You're welcome.
If there are no further questions on that, we're going to move to the second slice of types of facilities. We looked at 3 community centers for you. The first one, and by far the largest facility, community center, was the Tukwila Community Center, which was built back in 1997 for a little over $9 million. That was a while back. It's very large. It's 48,000 square feet. It has 2 gyms, 9 meeting rooms, a commercial kitchen, banquet facilities, and it's on a large parcel of land that has a walking trail and water park and picnic shelters, which they rent out, and some athletic fields and playgrounds and sports courts. There were over 175,000, probably a duplicated count, people using the facility in 2019, which was the last full year of use statistics. The facility is owned and operated by Tukwila. they have about the equivalent of 20 FTEs running all the programming and supporting the recreational activities going on in the facility, as well as taking care of the maintenance of it. It costs them about $3.8 million a year to maintain the facility, and about 24% of that cost is offset by rental revenue. At least those are statistics, again, from 2019. They did do a needs assessment before they built the study. It has a lot of surface parking, 312 spaces. They had a number of observations in terms of lessons learned. A couple I thought was interesting is that they said it was a challenge for them in terms of connecting with potential users, that their site was not on any bus lines, and they wish they had thought about that. They had some design suggestions along the lines here. And they also noted the importance of funding reserves on an ongoing basis in order to replace and repair the facility and equipment as it goes forward. If there are questions on that, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Heather for the next facility.
Councilmember Steckler has a question.
I think this might be a typo, but I was looking at your annual operating budget on this facility is at $905,000 a year in revenues.
Yep.
But expenses are $3.8 million.
Yep.
So they're losing $2 million a year on this thing?
Well, I don't think that's how they look at it. I think they look at it as a community asset. And that's
costing them $2 million a year to run this thing?
Yep.
Okay, I couldn't move that wasn't a typo, that's a reality.
That is their reality.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
No other questions.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Bignall. I appreciate your help there. I'll turn it over to Heather now.
So Rose Hill Community Center in Mukilteo, it is a 40,000 square foot facility with rentable rooms, fitness rooms, classrooms, performance space. They actually, you can lease or rent, I should say, their upper lawn plaza. They've got lots of different spaces that are available for lease. It is owned by the city of Mukilteo and it is operated by the city of Mukilteo. It cost about $13 million to construct. It opened in 2011 and the city issued bonds to pay for this construction project. Their annual operating budget is $1 million. And to follow up on Mr. Steckler's question from a moment ago, the number one piece of advice that Mr. Price, their Recreation and Cultural Services Director, gave me was determine level of cost recovery, if any, before you build. So I think that getting your money back out of these large and beautiful facilities may be more challenging than one would hope. He also recommended having all of your policies in place before opening because managing community expectations of what's going to be available when can be very, very challenging. Questions about Rose Hill?
I don't see any questions.
Okay. The next facility is the Lake Stevens Civic Center. They are undergoing a massive redevelopment of their entire downtown, putting it on the lakefront, putting beautiful buildings down there. The Civic Center is phase 2. They have reimagined their whole downtown over the last 5 years. The construction of their community center, known as the Mill, was the second phase. It opened in 2020. They had hoped to have some revenue, but then COVID happened and they have had no revenue from their brand new project. It's adjacent to their waterfront park with a boat launch called North Cove Park. And it's going to back up to a different phase that is a farmer's market and an open air market for pedestrian use. The Mill is approximately 5,300 square feet. It serves as a public meeting space for city council, boards and commissions, private gathering space, and rentals once COVID is out of the way. They have 3 rooms available in the Mill, and you can also rent the entire facility if you like. It's owned by the city of Lake Stevens. It's operated by the city of Lake Stevens. We have requested the total construction cost, and I spoke extensively with Russell Wright, who was delightful, but he just didn't have the number at his fingertips either time that I spoke to him. And the city paid for everything, design, construction, and equipment. Their funding did come from general and local funds, park impact fees, a PSRC grant from the Main Street Future Phase, state capital grants, and developer contributions. I think,
Sorry, Councilmember Stackler has a question.
This is the one that got the $2.1 million grant from the county, correct?
I believe that's correct. There were certainly a lot of grants that went into the construction.
Right, just recently. So judging by its size, that's going to be a huge part of their construction cost right there. It's not that big.
Yeah.
They didn't mention that at all, how they got it or what they had to do to get it or to be awarded that.
You know, Mr. Wright has agreed to be on one of the panels that Karen will tell us about on the end, and those are the kind of questions he is happy to answer. All he indicated was that they did have the Puget Sound Regional Council grant for the Main Street future phase.
Okay, so he's agreed to, he could be an asset to us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Heather, did they estimate any revenues that they brought in?
Well, he wanted to, sir, but they didn't have any for 2020, and he was going to look up what the rentals had been so far in 2021, and he just hasn't gotten back to me yet. Based on the tone of his voice, I'm guessing they weren't very high. And in fact, he didn't even quote a facility operating budget because they have so many outliers. They have costs, they don't have any revenue, they have COVID, they wish that would go away. So he couldn't even quote me an operating budget yet. He just said, we don't have any good data yet. Is there anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're moving on to performing arts centers, and we looked at several of these as well. And the first one I'm going to speak to briefly is the Kirkland Center. This was built in 1998 for about 4.2 million in construction costs, but that did not include the land, and it was a renovation of an older library building. There were also, as you'll see in the report, 1.1 million in additional soft costs to sort of get the reserves going for the building and support the nonprofit Kirkland Performance Center that was formed to manage and operate the facility under contract with the city. The city owns the facility and KPC operates the facility. The report has a list of the variety of grants that they received in support of the project. The city contributed about 27% of the total construction cost of almost 5.3 million. And they got a series of grants and donations that covered the remainder of the events. The interior tenant improvements were funded and installed by the nonprofit. You know, it's kind of secret science to design good acoustics in a performing arts center, and they took that on themselves. The city does provide ongoing annual support to the center, not that much in comparison to their operating budget, which is about 1.6 million gross. The city has contributed about $100,000 or $110,000 in 2019, including all of the admissions tax receipts that it collected on basically sales that went there, but also movie theaters in Kirkland would be generating admissions tax, and some ongoing general fund support as well to the tune of about $50,000. They did do a study of the business plan, market analysis, and operating plan before they launched. And this facility serves as a sort of just a community meeting venue, is their theory, is as much as it is a performance space. The gentleman I spoke to, Jeff Lockhart, who's been there for a long time, and he's their executive director at KPC, talked about, you know, we have choirs, we've had funerals, we've had parties, as well as we have, you know, performance groups that come in nationally and internationally, and they often work with other neighboring small performing arts center so you might have a group come in and it might give 5 performances over the course of 2 weeks in 5 different performing arts centers in the Puget Sound region. So it's kind of an interesting non-competitive model. There is an adjacent 3-story parking garage that provides free parking for the facility. And I think that's all I wanted to say about that one. If there are any questions on that, on Kirkland Performance Center. He had a number of good observations.
Councilmember Stackler has a question.
Yeah, I know it's a fascinating point you put down here about his comment. He sees the smaller packs, 200 to 800 seats, other facilities, often collaborate and getting bigger artists sharing multiple venues during one book engagement. And he wouldn't be concerned about more coming into the region. They collaborate to maximize joint successes. 80% of his visitors are from within a 5-mile radius, which I found very interesting. That was a real eye opener.
Yes, I thought that was pretty interesting as well. So I've asked him, and he has said he is willing to come and participate on one of the July panels that Heather mentioned. I figured he was a great advocate for this facility and very knowledgeable.
That was fascinating information. It just surprised me when I saw that.
Yeah. Other questions on that, or I'll move on to the IKEA Performing Arts Center. So this facility is located in the Renton High School. It was part of a larger remodel of the high school itself. It opened in 2003. Estimated construction cost was $3 million. We've got a straight banner underneath that. And about half of that money came from donations and grants. And IKEA's was the largest, so they got the naming rights. The funding from the school district, again, it's a school district owned and school district operated facility. The school district issued voter approved bonds to fund the renovation of the high school. They provide all the maintenance and operation for the facility. And unlike the other high school performance centers that we did track down, these folks were actually able to tell us not only the construction costs sort of their portion of the high school project for this Performing Arts Center, the $3 million back in 2011, but they also had a good sense of what their annual operating costs were for this specific piece of the high school. And that's about $274,000 in the budget in expenditures in 2021, and they'll recoup about 50% of that from ticket sales or rental revenues for people using the facility. And you can see that before COVID, they were booked about 50% of the time for use by other than the school district. And then about 25% of the time, the facility is used by the district itself. They have parking on site, 180 spaces. They feel is not adequate, but that's what they have there on site, and it is.
Karen, Councilmember Riles has a question.
Sure, go ahead, Councilmember.
I spent a lot of time in the theater. I was not a drama person throughout ever, but I enjoyed viewing such things. What is a fly space?
I believe that is where they take the curtain up, back behind, up. It's the space above the stage that allows them to raise the curtain up and drop sets and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, get the whole thing straight up in the air.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Heather then.
So here we have two back-to-back examples of performing arts spaces that are in high schools, and the answers to our survey questions were remarkably similar. So the first one is at Glacier Peak Performing Arts Auditorium at Glacier Peak High School in Snohomish. The facility is owned by the Snohomish School District. It's operated by Glacier Peak High School in the Snohomish School District. It opened in 2008, and because it was part of a whole new school, they did not have separate construction costs just for the Performing Arts Center. You'll hear that again with the next school. The city of Snohomish had no contribution to the construction, and the school district financed this new school with a voter-approved bond issue. There was a community assessment, but it was not focused on the Performing Arts Center. It was focused on the need for a whole new high school. Snohomish High School was very overcrowded, and they needed a second high school and opened it to the south and named it Glacier Peak. That is all of the information that we have on Glacier Peak, despite a lot of help from Ralph Rauer, who is their Executive Director of Operations. Does anyone have any questions about Glacier Peak and their funding? Okay, if not, we can go on to the next slide where the answers are very, very similar. This is Linwood High School Theater. It's very similar. The facility is owned by the Edmond School District. It's operated by Linwood High School in the Edmond School District. It just opened in 2009, so roughly 10, 11 years ago. And again, construction costs were not split out because it was a whole new school. Again, the funding came from a bond issue passed by the voters, and they did get one grant from the State of Washington Recreation and Conservation Office. The theater actually breaks even financially. Before COVID, there was even a full-time equivalent employee to run the light and sound board. Other district costs always include janitors and maintenance. Those things are forever. And the operating budget number was not available. A lot of school districts choose to do their accounting with the OSPI's free accounting software, and it doesn't necessarily split things out as fine as we would like to see them. They're very happy with the level of use. Before the pandemic, this theater was routinely booked weeks in advance. Questions about? Yes.
Councilmember Cavallari has.
I'm sorry?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a quick question. So I'm trying to understand the mechanics of the high school theaters. They are all technically on high school property, right?
Yes.
Everyone you mentioned. I'm just trying to figure out how that would fit into what we're doing in DRCC.
Well, if I may, it may or may not, but these were the facilities that you all identified for us to take a look at. I suppose it is also possible that if this type of a project became really a focus for the council moving forward, it may make some sense to reach out to the local school district and see if a partnership makes sense here for this type of a facility. But these other ones have been built by the school district with public school district money, operated, owned by the school district. IKEA had some notable grant support to help it get going. It's one model that we saw repeatedly in the facilities that y'all called out for us.
And I'm not trying to sound like Debbie Downer here. It's actually an interesting take. I hadn't really thought of a partnership with the school district off-site. I think it's a conversation worth having. And so thanks for bringing it up. Anyway, good.
Are there any other questions about these high school theaters?
I don't see any other questions, but I think I might like to take a moment. I see that it's already about 8:16, so we may want to actually extend the meeting because we still have a lot to do. Would I have a motion to extend the meeting to 9:30?
How about a motion to extend to 9?
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, so the next performing arts center is the Wagner Performing Arts Center in Monroe. This again is an entirely different model than what we had seen. This is a fairly large performing arts center for Monroe. It's 632 seats. It's owned by the Monroe School District, but it's operated by the Monroe Arts Council. This facility is one of the reasons we didn't use a cost inflator. This cost a whopping $140,000 in 1939. So not a great comparison. And it's named Wagner because he contributed, he made a large, he was a town father and he made a large contribution. So it cost $100,000. The city paid $118,000 and the gentleman contributed the rest. Now, what's interesting about this is it's entirely run by the Monroe Arts Council. In fact, they did a bunch of renovations to it in 2002. And when I spoke to the school district's finance director, she said that they contributed nothing to those renovations. So they're entirely volunteer and grant funded. The school district owns it. There's no city role at all. The Monroe Arts Council, PAC group, is responsible for raising funds for maintenance and repairs of the facility. So there's one more organization we'll talk to you about tonight that's also completely a volunteer kind of thing, but it's an entirely different model that was on the list of facilities to investigate. So questions about Wagner?
No questions.
Yeah, I have a couple. Do they have any information about usage at all? I know some of your documents said no, but I'm just curious, are they busy? How many shows they do? Any kind of information like that?
So I actually could not rouse a human from the Monroe Arts Council. I did speak with someone from the school district. I believe the facility has been closed for the entirety of COVID, and so no revenues from that. but their website, which is very robust, has pages from the past showing what they had done. And so it's clear from looking that they had shows in and out of there, and the school district does use it. But no, I don't have any up-to-date information from the Monroe Arts Council.
Okay, if there are no additional questions, we'll go to the last two categories here. The first, the last two is ball fields. And we had just a couple ball fields. We just thought we included this one here at your request. It's one that you're familiar with just for a good metric. This is a 64,000 square foot lighted turf field. Artificial turf field. You obviously, the city of Mill Creek owns and operates it. It was built at an estimated cost of $2.35 million back in 2004. That excludes the design or the land costs, which would add about another $2 million to the total project cost. The city staff estimate that the maintenance and operating cost of this facility is between $120,000 and $140,000 a year, and about 50% of that cost is offset by revenues generated at the field from rentals from clubs and the rental of the concession stand. The city obviously owns and operates the facilities. The sports leagues manage their use of the facility and scheduling. And there was a needs assessment done in the form of a community survey before the project was launched, and that survey was back in 2000. The fields are in very strong demand, as I suspect you are very familiar with. Parking can be a challenge when there are tournaments going on. There are only 40 spaces on site, 10 on adjacent street, and if you head south, you can find another 25, and they've opened a sort of a gravel pad on the DRCC properties for some overflow parking, and I believe the city rents that as well if folks need that. There was a few notes here from the staff that are interesting in terms of the experience of trying to operate a dual sport field and the concerns about funding, parking, excuse me, and the importance of having the field lit at night in terms of being able to maximize use and revenues. Unless there are questions on that, I will turn it back over to Heather for the other ball field complex we looked at. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this Cash Park Athletic Complex in the city of Everett, owned by the city of Everett and operated by the city of Everett. Phase 1, field number 1, opened in 2014. Then phase 2, which was field 2 and 3, opened in 2000. Oops, there's a typo. It opened in a different year. The city contribution for construction in progress for phases 2 and 3 was $2.7 million. They got a State of Washington Recreation and Conservation Office grant, actually 2 grants, one for $500,000 and one for $250,000. And the balance was paid by the city general fund. They did not issue any debt, they simply paid for it. It's a very popular field. It has 3 multi-purpose sports turf fields. One of the upgrades was moving it away from grass. The most recent project was a field replacement and upgrade to a multi-sport field complex. They can now accommodate soccer, lacrosse, flag football, and modified soccer fields. The facility is very heavily used, 75 to 90% of the time. Parking is a bit of a challenge. They have 190 parking spots, but during tournaments, they don't have enough parking. And lessons learned, this harkens back to another facility we've already mentioned that basically said, know your audience. Mr. Rittenmeyer said, be prepared to have a solid field use policy that addresses priority use and field allocation. If you're not prepared, you're open to a lot of issues to address the increased demand in the field. Questions about Cash Field?
No questions.
Okay. Now we're into the other category, and there are only 2 in this one. The first one is the Linwood Convention Center. If you wanted to do something really big that's available for all kinds of stuff. This facility is owned by the Linwood Public Facilities District, created originally by the county as the South Snohomish Public Facilities District, but the city then annexed the area and the name was changed. It's operated by a company called ASM Global. And their general manager is Sarah Blaine, who I spoke with about the facility. So it opened in the spring of 2005. The cost was $32.1 million. The city's contribution to those construction costs were a commitment to support repayment of the debt with Snohomish County. So for an overview of the construction funding of that $32 million, the Public Facilities District issued debt. Bonds were paid back jointly by contributions from the city and Snohomish County sales tax and hotel motel tax. This was done under a financing program that was authorized by the state, which sunsetted in 2004. Unclear of the relative share of obligation between the two agencies. So what Sarah's saying is she did not know who had paid more in that situation. The facility's annual operating budget is $4 million. And I wanted to give you their revenues. Level of use overall in 2019 was 41%. They have 400 parking spaces.
They actually break even.
Oh, that's right. Thank you, Karen. And they break even. So questions about something big and different like this?
Okay.
Nothing. Okay. Our last facility was the Rhododendron Species Botanical Garden. One of the things you wanted to look at was walking in open spaces. And this is another small facility with an interesting history. The facility is owned by the Rhododendron Garden Limited Liability Corporation and operated by the same. It originally opened in 1964 in Oregon and moved to Federal Way in 1975, where it's been ever since. The city contributed nothing to its construction, and the land it's on is gifted to them by Weyerhaeuser. So funding comes from their membership dues, plant and gift sales, major fundraisers with matching grants, additional grant writing, volunteer construction assistance, and private donations, including estates, endowments, and trust funds. IRG recently bought the Weyerhaeuser site and is negotiating a lease with the garden. They have publicly stated their support for the garden, but as of the date I did this research, they had not yet finalized what the ongoing land use costs would be, if any. When it was Weyerhaeuser, the land use costs were $0. Questions about the Rhodey Garden?
Okay.
Okay.
Heather, so this is just our last slide here. Thank you for your attention through this. It was fun to try to see all these different models. Our next steps are to try to schedule, assuming we can get this worked out with both the council calendar and the people that we'd like to come talk to you. We're proposing that we come back with 2 separate about 1-hour panels with about 3 to 4 people on each panel, including people from the facilities that we have discussed this evening. Ask them to make very short presentations, probably focusing not to repeat the information that we've given you, but to instead focus more on what they see as the benefits to their community from having these types of facilities and some of the challenges that they have observed and experienced and any advice that they have. So really short, tight presentations, and then give you all an opportunity, at least half the time in that hour be dedicated to your ability to ask them questions, and heck, they could ask each other questions as well. And we're gonna, depending on people's availability, we were gonna try to divide it up in the way you see here on the screen. And Heather's done a fab job in getting commitments from several of the folks she talked to. I have got outstanding requests to a couple of the folks I spoke with, but haven't yet heard back to them. So this is a work in progress. And then finally, as we talked about earlier this month, we're aiming at a July 28 council retreat on a Wednesday evening to give you all an opportunity for a more leisurely conversation about some of these issues and what's interesting to you all and what questions that you have. And that concludes what we had to say tonight, but we're happy to try to answer any other questions. And thank you so much for the time you've given us tonight to present.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. That was an excellent presentation. Help break everything down for us. I have one question for us. I know we were discussing the 28th for our retreat. I believe we were waiting for Councilmember Bond to confirm if he would be able to get that off to participate.
Yeah, my day off.
Okay, perfect. And I remember correctly, everyone else was okay for July 28th? All right, so looks like we're on then. July 28th it is.
And hopefully before then, we'll be at 2 council sessions with those recreational panels from folks from these facilities, so you can talk to them directly.
Perfect. Did anyone else have any questions before we move on to Karen? Thank you, Karen, very much.
Thank you, and my thanks again to Heather for doing most of the yeoman's work on this project. Thanks all.
Okay. Next up, we are moving on to the consent agenda. Council Member Briles and myself were on duty this time. Do I have approval? First up was approval of checks 63447 through 63505 and ACH wire transfers in the amount of $1,181,283.83. Do I have a motion? Or any exceptions? Sorry.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. Payroll and benefit ACH payments in the amount of $286,687.51. Any exceptions?
No exceptions.
No exceptions. We have city council meeting minutes of June 8th, 2021 and city council regular meeting. That is those. So city council meeting minutes for June 28th. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we will move on to reports. I had just a few things on my list.
Do we need to approve the minutes?
No, we already did.
I thought we did just, I thought that was just the vouchers. Oh, she had them. I'm sorry.
So moving on to reports. I do want to thank everyone. The senior parade was so much fun, and just like it was last year, it's so great to have the community come together. And I want to thank all the volunteers who worked so hard to make it happen. Our police chief and our police department, everyone in public works, just everyone has to come together to make this a great success. And also for Tana's for all her volunteer coordination that she did. That was a huge undertaking. I just want to thank everyone for coming together to make it such a success. Next, I know I have the Alliance of Housing Authority meeting tomorrow night, so I will report back next week. And I am also filling in for Mayor Holzpaul for the Snohomish County tomorrow meeting tomorrow night, and I will be reporting back at the next meeting. And finally, I have been out talking to communities, and I just wanted to bring something up. I was out in part of Webster's Pond that goes out to Seattle Hill Road today, and there's quite a few concerns regarding that road that passes through and the traffic and how fast that traffic is. I know we witnessed it while we were there. Cora was with me, and there were quite a few cars just speeding right through there. So I know it seems that they brought this up before, and I would be interested in learning a little more about this, and looking into it, because I think they have some legitimate concerns out there, and I witnessed it firsthand myself. So after that, I'll move on and hand it over to Councilmember Bob.
Thank you, Mayor. No report.
Councilmember Stecker.
Just a quick update. As I mentioned last week, I attended a federal webinar on the CARES Act, the carryover, as well as the American Recovery Plan. I know that our finance director is going to be updating us on the American Recovery Plan. I was just a couple of quick highlights that I wanted to share, which she'll probably go more in depth, but I was surprised that the allocation of funds has been established, and that they've really limited the number of things you can't use the money on, basically supporting pension funds or fund a tax cut. But they're really open to the creativity of the cities on how they want to help local businesses, health services, water, sewer, broadband, technology, and any other type of business process improvements. So, and I also noticed that a number of the cities, including Seattle, has already allocated their full plan of how they're going to use their American Recovery Plan funds, not specific, but by buckets, how they're going to do it. So I'm, the only thing I want to mention, might be a little out of order here, but recommendation is I think it'd be a great idea for us to look at setting up a committee with representation from the city, obviously the council, and maybe even the private sector, to put together a plan of how we want to use the initial $5 million that we already have allocated. But we have, of course, our second allocation coming in next year, because that money is here now. And so we should probably start working on putting a plan together how we want to utilize those funds. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Cavallari.
Thank you, Mayor. Fire Board for Mill Creek met this evening, and without going into broad strokes, just want to embrace not only my colleagues up here on the council, but the citizens that the costs for services are going up exponentially, and we will be bearing those costs. So at some point, I hope to have these conversations publicly, but better to rip the Band-Aid off than to take it off slow. Besides that, I would also note that I would like to thank, I think John Steckler brought up a really good point about appreciation of boards that serve for the city. We do appreciate you, we do respect and value you, and we're blessed to have you. That is it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Bryce.
Yes, I would just like to share my experience in bringing in my kids to have their passports updated at our passport office. It was fantastic. It was really quick. It was a good experience. Felt totally safe. And my wife was particularly enamored because they kept telling her what a great job she did filling out her paperwork ahead of time and having everything ready, which is something everyone appreciates when they interact with a government agency and say, did I bring everything I'm supposed to? And I say, yes. The other thing was I also attended the graduate parade, and I was proud to be able to say congratulations, shouted at them as they drove past, and saw several kids that I know through Kiwanis and Key Club, and just to say congratulations to so many of our graduates who participated. 4 or 5 kids in the class, or 4 or 5 young adults now, I ought to say, per car. So it was really a lot of interaction with a lot of people. I think we had less cars, but I think we were able to bunch up into the cars this time. And I just wanted to give a special thanks to all of our volunteers and staff who worked on that. I know it was a good amount of work, and I'm really proud of what you did. It really came off real well, I think. Thank you.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to share how fun it was to work with the graduates and on the graduation parade. It was a lot of fun watching them drive by, bumper to bumper, decorated with balloons and writings on the cars, the streamers, and banners, and then playing music in the parking lot. And it was a lot of fun, just even in the setup of it, and the execution was flawless. I'd like to thank Tanis for organizing all the volunteers. Couldn't have been done without her, and Kristen as well. So that's it. It was a wonderful thing. I think we definitely should continue it as a fun trend moving forward. Maybe opening it up more to various levels of graduation as well, so we can get more participants. It was fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I will hand it over to the city manager.
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I beg your pardon. In addition to our finance director presenting this evening, Director Mike Todd has a real quick update in follow-up to the folks that had spoken at the podium at the last council meeting regarding the parking situation at Vintage. What I want to say to introduce the topic of the ARPA is that our Directors continue to work to formulate ideas and suggestions for a possible use of the money, the ARPA funding. What we did want to do is, though, in formulating suggestions, slow down a moment and in a future session, perhaps have a discussion that would pretty much introduce a concept phase to what it is we want to do, how we want to accomplish it, the extent to which the money that we receive could be considered an investment that would pay dividends going forward versus a one-time expenditure of the money, or any other guiding principles, if you will, that the council and the administrative team would like to refer to in making decisions ultimately on how these monies are allocated. We want to acknowledge above all else that this is ultimately a prerogative of the city council, but we want to take our role in making recommendations and providing suggestions seriously. We don't want to do it in a rush or haphazard fashion. We're not yet at the point of presenting what our recommendations would be, but we're going to be talking again about some general considerations in future sessions of council. So with that said, I'm going to turn the floor over to our finance director, Gimzo.
Sorry about that. I lost my mute button. Okay, so I really just wanted to cover, we're getting 5.8 million, and we have eligible expenditures will be from March 3rd of 21 to December 31st of 2024. Clarifying that these funds have to be obligated by 2024, but they can be spent through 2026. I know that there was a lot of concern that for larger building projects that cities are considering, they were worried that they weren't going to be able to get money spent by 2024 because of the engineering and all the planning that goes into these things. And then I just wanted to hit the overarching rules. So there are 4 main rules that we need to stick to. These, you don't have to follow all of them. It has to hit in one of the 4 categories. So expenses need to be related to containing or mitigating COVID, or containing or mitigating the negative economic impacts of COVID. So that's a really broad area, but it is fairly specific. So that's just something to keep in mind. Premium pay for eligible workers is something that is possible to do with the money. There is a max of $13 an hour over whatever the original pay was, with a limit of $25,000 per person, and you cannot go over 150% of the average salary in the area. The third item is revenue loss, and we have roughly 5.4 million that we can claim in this, and this is a nice area that is actually so far in the interim rule, it has less strings attached. So this could be a way we could get some things done that we need to get done. It does have to be able, so if there was some kind of a capital project that was going to be involved with revenue loss money, it would have to help citizens is like immediately after it was done. So it would have to do some kind of direct aid or provide assistance to citizens. So think like a sidewalk. If you redid a sidewalk, citizens would immediately be able to use that sidewalk. And then the last option is investments in water, sewer, broadband, and they did include stormwater. And so that's something that could be very beneficial for us, especially with our aging infrastructure. And then I hadn't planned on showing this, but I think it's a good item to consider. So this is the way the ARPA funding was broken out. And this section right here for the 350 billion, this is where our money is going to be coming from. And so we have small businesses that had 84 billion allocated. We had small business support that had 59 billion here. And then we also had restaurants that had 25 billion here. So there were quite a few pieces of this money for businesses. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that. Because I think when we consider going forward and we decide what exactly our buckets of money are going to look like, this is something we should be considering. And then,
Director Gibbs, before you go further, Councilmember Cavallari had a question.
yes.
Yeah, Mayor, I'll hold off on the questions until she's done presenting. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, and that's really all I have. I know we're going to be talking maybe at a later date on what exactly we want those buckets to look like. I know a lot of cities are not wanting to give any kind of final information just because we don't have final direction. We should get final direction sometime after July 16th. You can contact Treasury up until that point for any kind of recommendations on things that you feel should be allowed to be used, have the ARPA funding be used for. So after that date, we should have solid answers on what exactly we can spend this money on.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So this $5.8 million, I want to, my hope is that we don't get, our eyes get big, that we have a chance to fix this sewer line or this telephone pole down at the other end of the street. We budgeted for those things through the capital facilities plan and our biennium budget. I want to make sure that our focus is laser focused on getting this money to the people that have been sorely hurt by COVID and their losses of revenue, their losses of business, the landowners, all around the community, the buildings that are now vacant, town center and some strip malls, and possibly even toward boosting areas where it may need it, where I'm sure it's going to need it near the farm at some point. That we keep an eye, that remember that this is their money and we are just really facilitating it. It's one of the reasons I wanted to create that kind of ad hoc committee within the committee or within the council, 2 or 3 members, maybe a city staff member, 2 or 3 council members and a staff member or 2 at the city, just to go over to make sure, without decision-making power, just to make sure that we go over and make sure that we're really looking at how best to facilitate this money to the public, not to spend it, to get it to them, to the folks that have been really damaged and really hurt by this. That's my only goal here, and hopefully we can get that committee going too and make recommendations to the council. Thank you.
And I didn't have anything else. If anyone has any questions.
Councilmember Steckler had a question, and then Councilmember Blunt.
I'm just curious, have we, on the webinar I attended, they talked about the possibility of having cities hiring consultants that are educated in the American Recovery Plan funds and programs that cities can do that can help the cities with creative ways to use the funds. And have we looked into bringing a consultant in to help us with the most optimum way to utilize these funds for our city? And maybe they might have some creative approaches that none of us have looked at. Is that a possibility?
We can use funding. We can use ARPA funding to get a grant specialist. Yes, we can.
Yeah, good idea. That's the end of my question. There's a suggestion.
Right, Councilmember Blunt.
Thank you. So this whole weird COVID-19 thing that we've all been going through, new, and a lot of fears that a lot of people were going to suffer, and many did. But in a weird turn of events, there's actually been like quite a few people who stumbled into a bit of a windfall that actually made more money. I've got multiple friends of mine in the service industry that ended up making more money staying home than they were when they were working. And that's good. Don't fault them. They're hardworking folks, and many of them not making a ton of money, so a little extra. God bless them. I don't fault them one bit. But we do have a group of people who didn't get to work remotely. They didn't get to stay home and maybe put a dress shirt on with pajamas below. They came to work every day, and many of them here, we've got officers that jumped in police cars with the bulletproof vests, and now their new piece of equipment, the mask. And they set out to go and try and do the job in an unknown. They didn't know what they were going into. The media was painting it pretty bad. It would be reasonable for them to be somewhat concerned before prior to getting a vaccine, especially if they were in any way, shape, or form in a risk category. We also have other staff, not just our police officers, that didn't get to work remotely. They came in and in the unknown, and I would like to see us aggressively look at the premium pay for the eligible workers part of this and see what we can do to compensate those folks for what they did and what they were willing to do in a time where we just didn't know what we were going to have. We've been blessed. We haven't had a lot of tragedy related to COVID. I mean, there are people, we all probably know somebody who at least had a family member who got very sick or worse, died. But none of my immediate family has been harmed, and so I feel very fortunate to be in that category. But nonetheless, these folks that did come in and work, as they didn't know what exactly this was all about, how bad was it going to be, we did it anyway. So I'd like us to look at that option in particular.
Thank you, Councilmember Bond. I noticed the time, and we still have an executive session, so I think now might be the time to entertain the motion to extend the meeting to 9:30 this evening.
Mayor, I would like to make that motion to extend to 9:30.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Meeting is extended to 9:30. Thank you. Do we have any other comments regarding Director Genzo's presentation this evening?
Thank you, Mayor.
City Manager, I think you have our thoughts. Is that all you needed? Did you need anything else from us this evening?
No, we really appreciate the general direction. We'll take that into account as we continue our planning. With the council's permission, we would ask for Director Todd to just give us a quick update following up on the complaints relating to vintage parking at the last council meeting. Mike?
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. Thank you, Council. I'll try to make this quick. A couple of weeks ago, a citizen came to the microphone, and we've also heard from lots of other folks in the community about the situation at the Vintage. It's the 55+ residential facility up there next to the farm up in eGov. We have been in contact or made attempts to contact all of those people who have had some issues. They come to us by phone, email, and through various other agencies. We've been in contact with Representative Berg, Senator Hobbs, and Councilmember Mead's office on the same issue. So we're all coordinating together to make sure we give them the same answers and keep getting the answers to the people as we can do so. We've been in contact with the Vintage Management several times since this came up. I guess I should back up a little bit. What happened on June 1st was the Vintage Management started putting out a notice to residents that they were not to park in the commercial spaces that are designated for commercial use in the Vintage parking lots. So there is residential spaces and there's commercial spaces. And so the issue was that residents were receiving those notices. We've talked to management several times about that. And indeed, we talked to the owner, Ryan Patterson, this afternoon, and they are working towards a resolution of the problem. What they're doing for right now, we're told, although we still need confirmation of this, but as of Friday, the plan and confirmed, I think today, by Ryan Patterson, was that they are going to put off this enforcement action on parking until late July, when there's going to be more reserve parking available, to their residents in the garage across 41st Street. So at the farm, that was part of the original plan by the developer, was to add additional parking more than is required for the residential and commercial uses on the farm. So there'd be more spaces for the folks at Vintage, both commercial and residential tenants there. And so that's essentially the problem that's going on now. Our staff's role has been advocating for those people, for their needs, trying to help the management understand what's going on, and conveying those concerns back to management, and have facilitated some of those discussions. Ultimately, this is a private matter between the residents and the property owner regarding the terms of the lease. If people lease the spots and are expecting a parking space, it's reasonable for those folks to have a parking space available. And so the Vintage management is working towards that. We'll keep you apprised if this changes, but our expectation is they're going to put off any of the enforcement actions they were talking about, and it may have been accelerated by some of the activities you saw in the newspaper, and we will let you know if that changes. But I think this should be hopefully in abatement and should get resolved over the next couple of weeks. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Director Todd, for following up on that and bringing back that important information to us, back to the council and to the public. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next item, I have a question because we have down here the, where did it go? We have the Arts and Beautification Board minutes and Park and Recreation Board minutes. Was that supposed to be up under the consent agenda?
Mayor, it is not. It's my understanding with prior practice that the council is not required to vote on these minutes. It is part of the A and B board minutes. And so we include it in the report section so that the council is apprised of what the board that is an advisory board that the council has been working on, and the minutes from those meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to audience communication is next up. Name, address, and you have 3 minutes, and I will start with Will Nelson. Will.
There we go.
There you
Will
go.
Nelson, 14925 29th Drive Southeast, Mill Creek, Washington. I was rather intrigued by Councilmember Cavallari's comments on the fire board. Somewhat sarcastically, does that mean we're rolling over with round heels to the fire district? And is the city going to take a windfall profit off of these negotiations like they did with the library switcheroo in 2004? Thank you. I expect an answer sometime later. Bye.
Thank you, Will. Anyone else have any comments? Anyone in council chambers would like to speak? No other communication, so with that, we will move on to recess to executive session. Council will recess to executive session to discuss the status of collective bargaining negotiations pursuant to RCW 42.30.144, and to discuss one item of potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110. And one item of current litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)(I). The executive session is expected to last approximately 30 minutes, and no action will be taken following the end of the executive session. Thank you.
can still beat them, but it's a lot more work.
Yeah, like, is everyone here in our discussion right now?
It's a
Mayor,
That's the thing is about people who plays poker with. It's okay.
My wife
That is
used to
okay.
run to gamble with one of those crowds.
All right.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem, what time did we officially, you need to adjourn the meeting?
9:19.
The meeting's adjourned?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
9:19.
Okay, thank you, everyone.